Exactly. At 3:14 a.m., my secure phone rang. My security chief appeared, his face pale as a ghost. Do not leave your home under any circumstances. Trust me, hide now. When I demanded to know why, he only trembled. It has already begun. By 8:02 a.m., the police called accusing me of a horrific massacre I never committed. Suddenly, the bunker screen lit up, and my eldest daughter appeared with a chilling smile. I need your blood more than your life, Father. The hunt for the golden blood officially begins. This story won't leave you unchanged. Before we continue, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice about family, yes or no? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs today. Just a note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. What matters most is the message it carries. The dedicated phone rang at 3:14 in the morning, the sound cutting through the silence of my penthouse bedroom like a blade. Only 3 people knew that number. 2 of them were dead. I answered without turning on the light. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, and Clayton Travers appeared on video, 40 years old, my penthouse security director for the past year, wearing a face I had never seen him use before. Tense, urgent, almost afraid. Absolutely do not leave the penthouse, he said, no preamble, no good morning. Do not come to headquarters this morning. My name is Harlan Whitfield, 55 years old, chairman of a biometric security empire worth $12 billion, and the only man in the world with a genome that won't let me die. I built my fortune on reading people, on staying 3 moves ahead, on never showing fear. But Clayton's expression told me the night I had been waiting for had finally arrived. Look down at the parking lot, he said. I crossed to the window of my 88th floor penthouse overlooking Marina Bay, Singapore. The city glittered below like scattered diamonds, but my eyes went to the private parking area beneath the building. My jet sat on the pad where I kept it fueled and ready. Surrounding it were 6 vehicles with red lights flashing silently in the pre-dawn darkness. Special forces, coordinated, professional. She told me this night would come, Clayton said quietly. He meant my wife, Rowena, dead for 6 years, but still orchestrating moves from beyond the grave like a chess grandmaster who knew every variation before the game began. She had recruited Clayton a year ago through channels I still didn't fully understand. She had built the vault. She had programmed the protocols. She had prepared for a war she knew would outlive her. The special forces weren't there for me. They were there to make sure I couldn't leave, to trap me here while something else happened somewhere I couldn't see. Who sent them? I asked. Clayton's jaw tightened. I'll call you back in 20 minutes. Stay inside. Lock everything. The screen went dark. I stood at the window in my silk pajamas, barefoot on Italian marble, looking down at the vehicles that had turned my home into a prison. The air conditioning whispered through the vents. The smell of last night's coffee still lingered in the penthouse French roast, the way Rowena used to make it, because I had never learned to change the setting. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt something close to peace. The waiting was over. Whatever my daughter Sidonie had been planning for the past 8 months, whatever had driven her to build coalitions and move money through shell companies and hire mercenaries who didn't ask questions, it was happening now. Tonight. And Rowena had known it would come to this. 3 minutes later, the hologram screen in my study lit up without command. That had never happened before. I walked to the study, my feet silent on the hardwood, and stopped in the doorway. The hologram projector Rowena had installed 5 years ago was active, throwing light into 3-dimensional form in the center of the room. And standing there, as real as memory, was my daughter, Leora. She appeared as she had been at 27, 6 years ago when she died. Dark hair pulled back in the ponytail she always wore when she was working. Jeans and a gray sweater. Her digital form was so precise I had to remind myself she was light, not flesh. An AI construct my wife had built to preserve our daughter's mannerisms, her speech patterns, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. But this was different. "Dad," Leora said, and her voice carried weight that no simulation should possess. "I knew it would happen tonight. Mom programmed me to wake up at this exact time." I stared at the hologram of my dead daughter. The AI had been dormant for months. I had stopped activating it because the conversations felt too hollow, too much like talking to an echo that could never answer back with anything real. "What's happening?" I asked. Leora's hologram moved to the wall screen, her fingers made of light swiping through data as if she could touch it. 3 satellite feeds appeared monitoring 3 different locations simultaneously. I recognized the coordinates: Singapore, Zurich, Dubai. "Mom built me to help you tonight," Leora said. She knew Sidoni would move when the dark web auction hit critical mass. She knew you'd be trapped here. She knew you'd need eyes everywhere. The hologram worked with an efficiency that looked nothing like artificial intelligence. It looked like purpose, like a daughter protecting her father. How does an artificial intelligence look nervous? But Leora's projection flickered slightly as she pulled up financial data security feeds, communication intercepts. Her hands moved too quickly, too urgently. Her eyes darted to me and then away like she was hiding something, like she was afraid. "Leora," I said carefully, "are you just an AI?" She froze. The data screens kept scrolling, but her holographic form went perfectly still. When she turned to look at me, her expression carried something I had never seen in any simulation, any program, any machine. "Grief. I need you to know something before tonight ends," she said quietly. "But not yet." Then she turned back to the data screen, as if she hadn't said anything at all. I stood there in my study, watching my dead daughter's hologram monitor the coordinates of my living daughter's attack, and felt the floor of my reality shift. Lyora's projection flickered again. For just a moment, so brief I could have imagined it, I saw her hand tremble. AI doesn't tremble, but there was no time to question her. Outside my window, the Special Forces vehicles still flashed their silent red warning. Somewhere in the world, Sidonie was making her move. And in my study, a ghost made of light was keeping secrets she refused to tell. The night I had been waiting for had finally come. I couldn't sleep after what Leora had said, so I sat in the leather chair by the window and waited for the sun that wouldn't come for hours. Below, the Special Forces vehicles still flashed their red lights in patient silence. The hologram of my daughter continued working behind me, her light casting shadows that moved like something alive. "Let me tell you who I am because it matters for what comes next. My name is Harlan Whitfield. I am 55 years old. I built Whitfield Biometric Security Group from nothing into an empire that touches every major government contract in 17 countries. The company is worth $12 billion, though money stopped meaning much to me years ago. What matters is the other thing, the genome, Rh null blood type. Scientists call it golden blood because fewer than 50 people on Earth carry it. My cells reject aging in ways researchers don't fully understand. I should have died from 3 different cancers by now. Instead, I'm healthier than men half my age. People want what I have. Some want to study it. Some want to steal it. My daughter Sidonie wants to kill me for it, and I have known about her plan for 8 months. That's the part no one understands yet. I'm not a victim stumbling blind into an ambush. I've been waiting, watching, letting her build her coalition, move her money, recruit her mercenaries, because my wife Rowena told me to wait. 2 years ago, 3 days before the virus killed her, she looked at me from her hospital bed and said something I didn't understand until tonight. "You'll know which night it is," she whispered, her voice already fading, "because Leora will wake up on her own." Rowena had been dead for 2 years, but her voice still guided every decision I made. I turned to look at the hologram working behind me. Leora's digital form flickered as she processed satellite feeds, financial transactions, encrypted communications. Tonight she had activated without command for the first time in 6 years. Spontaneous, purposeful, exactly as Rowena had promised. So everything begins now. The leather chair smelled faintly of the oil I used to condition it, the same oil Rowena had bought from a small shop in Florence during our honeymoon 30 years ago. I kept buying it from the same place even after she died. Some habits you don't break because breaking them would mean accepting the loss as permanent. Outside the window, Singapore transformed slowly from night to pre-dawn gray. The Marina Bay stretched out below like black glass. I could see the reflection of my building's lights on the water geometric patterns that looked almost peaceful if you didn't know what was happening in the parking lot beneath them. How long does a father wait before accepting his daughter wants him dead? 8 months. That's how long. I discovered Sidonia's first move in June, when one of Rowena's automated financial alerts flagged an unusual transaction. A shell company in the Cayman Islands had purchased shares in a biotech firm that specialized in genetic extraction. The company's board included 2 former employees from my own research division, people Sidonia had fired 3 years ago for ethics violations, people who would do anything for enough money. From there, I followed the thread. The dark web auction for black market genome samples, the meetings with mercenary groups in Dubai, the encrypted communications with someone inside my own security team. Sidoni had spent 18 months building an operation designed to extract my genetic material, by force kill me to eliminate legal complications, and sell the samples to the highest bidder before anyone could stop her. She was thorough, professional, ruthless. She was my daughter, and she had inherited my strategic mind. But she didn't know I was watching. At 5:45, the first pink light touched the horizon. Leora's hologram shifted her attention, snapping to something on the satellite feed. "Dad," she said, and her voice carried that same too-human quality that made my skin prickle. 2 black SUVs, stationary for 123 minutes, positioned 200 meters east of the building. I stood and walked to the monitor wall. Leora highlighted the vehicles on the thermal imaging display. They had been sitting there since before Clayton called. No movement, no visible occupants. Just waiting. Facial recognition, Leora said, pulling up archived footage from the building's external cameras. The image zoomed on the driver's side window of the lead SUV. A man in his 40s gray suit, expression neutral. Then Leora overlaid a second image, the same man 2 years ago, standing in the back row of Rowena's memorial service. Subject attended Rowena Whitfield Memorial Service, Leora reported. No match in employee database. No connection to Whitfield Biometric Security Group. Identification unknown. I stared at the face of a man who had come to my wife's funeral and was now part of whatever was happening outside my building. The coffee smell from the kitchen had faded, replaced by the clean, recycled air of the penthouse ventilation system. My bare feet were cold on the marble floor. "Show me everything else," I said. Leora's screens filled with data. Surveillance feeds from 17 different angles. Communication intercepts from encrypted channels. Financial transactions moving through offshore accounts. And then in the corner of the main display, a single red dot appeared on the map of Singapore. The dot was moving. "Tracking signal detected," Leora said. "Source GPS-enabled luxury timepiece. $2 million valuation. Diamond setting. Custom manufacture." I knew that watch. I had given it to Sidoni for her 30th birthday 3 years ago, back when I still believed my daughter loved me for something other than my genetic code. "The signal is moving toward this building," Leora continued. The red dot pulsed on the screen, advancing steadily through the pre-dawn streets of Singapore. Sidoni was coming. She thought she was hunting me, closing in on a target who didn't know she was there. She had no idea I was watching every step. I stood at the window as the sun began to rise over Marina Bay, my dead daughter's hologram beside me, my living daughter's location blinking on the screen like a heartbeat. The Special Forces vehicles still flashed their silent warning below. The black SUVs waited in the shadows. And I waited too because Rowena had taught me that the hardest part of war isn't fighting. It's knowing exactly when to stop waiting and strike back. The red dot stopped moving at 7:30, settling 2 blocks away from my building. Sidoni was in position, waiting for her window. I watched the tracking signal pulse steadily on Leora's screen and wondered if my daughter had any idea how thoroughly her mother had prepared for this moment. At 8:02 that morning, every screen in Singapore turned red with the same urgent message: massacre at Whitfield Biometric Security Group headquarters. I watched it unfold on the monitor wall. The breaking news banner scrolled across every channel simultaneously: CNN, BBC Local, Singapore networks, even the digital billboards visible through my penthouse window. Same footage, same timestamp, same perfectly coordinated information release. Critical incident at Whitfield headquarters, the anchor announced, her voice sharp with professional urgency. Multiple casualties reported. Police seeking this individual for questioning. The screen cut to security footage from my building's main lobby. Timestamp 8:02 a.m. A man walked through the entrance with confident, measured steps. He wore a charcoal suit I owned. He drove my silver Rimac Navara, the electric hypercar I kept in the executive garage. He moved with my exact gait, the slight favor of the left leg from an old skiing injury, the way I adjusted my cuffs before entering a building. The man was me, except I was standing in my penthouse watching myself commit a crime I hadn't committed. "That's you, Dad," Leora said, her hologram flickering beside me. Facial recognition confirms 99.4% match. "I know," I said quietly, "but I wasn't there." I leaned closer to the screen. The deepfake was flawless. Not the crude digital manipulations I had seen in corporate espionage cases. This was something else entirely. Every microscopic detail replicated perfectly. The way light hit my cheekbones, the specific angle of my shoulders, even the pattern of gray in my temples matched exactly. "Rewind it," I told Leora, frame by frame. The footage played again in slow motion. The man, the fake me, paused at the security desk, turned slightly toward the camera and smiled. Not a broad smile, just the small professional acknowledgement I gave building security every morning for 20 years. They hadn't just stolen my face, they had stolen every microscopic detail of who I was. "Deepfake generation at this level requires quantum processing," Lyora said, running analysis across multiple screens. "This technology shouldn't exist yet. Not in private hands. The computational power alone would cost hundreds of millions," I finished. "Which means whoever is behind this has resources that match or exceed mine." The news coverage continued. Police cordoning off my headquarters, ambulances with silent lights, a reporter standing outside the building, speaking into a microphone, with the kind of grave expression reserved for national tragedies. "Authorities have not released casualty numbers," the reporter said, "but sources inside the building report multiple fatalities. The suspect fled the scene and is considered armed and extremely dangerous." My phone rang, not the dedicated line. My regular mobile, the number listed on corporate documents accessible to anyone who knew where to look. The screen showed unknown caller. I glanced at Leora. Her hologram nodded once. "Record it," I said. "Run voice analysis against archived files." I answered on the third ring. "Harlan Whitfield." "Mr. Whitfield, this is Officer Hayes with Singapore Police." The voice was male, professional, with the clipped accent of someone who had learned English as a second language but spoke it perfectly. "Are you aware of the critical incident at your headquarters this morning?" "I'm watching it now on television," I said, keeping my voice steady. Concerned but not panicked. Exactly how an innocent man would sound. "What happened?" "We need you to come to the central station immediately for questioning. You are currently our primary person of interest into." I stopped listening to the words and started listening to the voice, the cadence, the specific way he pronounced certain syllables, the slight pause before questioning, like he was reading from a script but trying to make it sound natural. I knew that voice. The voice on the phone belonged to a ghost. Officer Hayes, I said carefully. Can you provide your badge number? Of course. 63829. Mr. Whitfield, time is critical here. We have witnesses placing someone matching your description. I understand. I interrupted, watching Lyora's screens fill with waveform analysis pattern matching voice print comparison. I want to cooperate fully. Can you tell me which station I should report to? While he answered some address I didn't bother memorizing, because I had no intention of going Leora's analysis completed. Red warning indicators flashed across her holographic display. Archive footage played on the secondary screen, a man in his late 40s, speaking at a board meeting 4 years ago, gesturing with the same hands that had signed partnership agreements worth billions. Lloyd Connolly, 49 years old when he supposedly died. My former business partner. The man I had trusted with half my company's strategic operations until the plane crash over the Java Sea 3 years ago. Private jet. Mechanical failure. No survivors. I had attended his memorial service. I had spoken at the podium about his vision, his integrity, his irreplaceable contribution to everything we built. And now he was on my phone pretending to be a police officer, using the massacre he helped orchestrate to lure me into custody. I'll be there within the hour, I lied smoothly. Thank you, Officer Hayes. I ended the call. Leora's voice cut through the silence. 99.7% voice match. This is Lloyd Connolly, Dad. He's not dead. I stared at the frozen image on the screen, Lloyd's face from 4 years ago, alive and animated, discussing quarterly projections like death was something that happened to other people. The penthouse air conditioning hummed quietly. Outside the window, Singapore continued its morning routine, unaware that the man on every news channel was standing in his home watching his own manufactured guilt. Lloyd had been more than a business partner. He had been at my wedding. He had held Leora when she was 3 days old. He knew how I took my coffee, knew the specific way I signed documents, knew every mannerism that deepfake had replicated with such perfect quantum-processed precision. The organization hunting me wasn't just powerful, it was personal, and they had only just begun. Lloyd Connolly was alive, which meant everything I thought I knew about the past 3 years was carefully constructed fiction. But there was no time to process that, because the wall opened without warning. A seamless section of my penthouse study rotated inward to reveal Clayton Travers standing in a tunnel I had never seen before. Not because it didn't exist, I knew it existed. Rowena had shown me the blueprints 12 years ago when she designed the building's hidden infrastructure. But I had never seen Clayton use it, had never watched him emerge from darkness like something summoned rather than hired. We need to leave, Clayton said. Now. He stepped into the study, and the wall sealed behind him with the whisper of precision engineering. No visible seam. No indication that anything had moved. The penthouse smelled faintly of ozone from Leora's holographic projector and the coffee I had abandoned hours ago. There's something you need to know, Clayton said, and his voice carried a weight I had never heard before. Not urgency, finality. I am not human. I am a bio-cyborg programmed by Rowena Whitfield to activate precisely today, February 14th, at 3:14 in the morning. He stood there in his tailored security uniform, looking exactly like the man I had worked with for a year. Same face, same posture, same micro-expressions that conveyed competence and controlled alertness. But now he was telling me what lay beneath the skin. She built me to protect you, Clayton continued. 12 years ago, before Sidoni turned, before Lloyd's supposed death, before any of this began. Rowena knew this day would come. I looked at him, this creation my wife had assembled in secret, this guardian she had planted in my life like a landmine set to detonate at the perfect moment. I know, I said. Clayton's expression didn't change, but something in his stance shifted slightly. Relief, maybe, or the biomechanical equivalent of it. You've known since I arrived, he said. Not a question. Since the third day, I confirmed. You made coffee exactly the way Rowena used to make it. French roast specific temperature, precise timing. No one knew those details except her. So either you were impossibly well researched, or you were something she built to carry her knowledge forward. Rowena had built protectors I would never meet planted in my life, years before I knew I needed them. The sound of sirens drifted up from street level, still distant, but growing closer. Leora, I said to the hologram working silently at the monitors. Time window. Cameras offline in 90 seconds. She responded without looking away from her screens. Window closes at 10:32 exactly. After that, every security feed in a 500-meter radius comes back online simultaneously. Clayton moved to the tunnel entrance and pressed his palm against a biometric reader hidden in the wall panel. The section rotated open again, revealing a descending staircase lit by soft blue emergency lights. Rowena designed this tunnel during the building's construction, Clayton said. Only her DNA and yours can access it. No one else knows it exists except the four of us. Four people. Clayton, Leora, me, and Stuart Caldwell, Rowena's brother, who had helped finance the building's construction and knew about certain contingencies my wife had built into the foundation. 90 seconds starting now, Leora announced. I followed Clayton into the tunnel. The wall sealed behind us with a soft, pneumatic hiss. The air smelled different here, recycled, temperature-controlled, carrying the faint metallic tang of advanced filtration systems. The staircase descended 3 levels, then opened into a corridor, lit by the same blue emergency lighting. At the end of the corridor sat a capsule, not a car, not a vehicle in any traditional sense. A sleek magnetic pod designed to move through electromagnetic rails beneath Singapore's streets. Rowena had shown me the specs years ago, explained how the city's underground infrastructure could be repurposed, how certain transit tunnels could be accessed if you knew the right codes and had the right DNA. The capsule's door opened as we approached, recognizing my biometric signature. 6 Special Forces vehicles converging on penthouse main entrance. Leora's voice came through a speaker embedded in the capsule's ceiling. They don't know you've already left. I climbed inside. The interior was minimal: 2 seats, a control panel, emergency supplies, and sealed compartments. Clayton took the driver's position, though driver was a generous term for someone monitoring an automated magnetic rail system. The capsule door sealed, the cabin pressurized with a soft pop that made my ears adjust. Then we moved. The capsule moved through Singapore's hidden veins like blood through a body that didn't know it was dying. No engine sound, no vibration. Just smooth, silent acceleration as the electromagnetic rails pulled us forward through tunnels that officially didn't exist. Dim green emergency lights flickered past the capsule's narrow windows, creating a strobe effect that made time feel elastic and uncertain. Destination? Clayton asked. The vault, I said. Beneath Singapore Bay. Coordinates Rowena designated as fallback position Alpha. Clayton input the commands. The capsule adjusted its trajectory, banking smoothly through an intersection of underground tunnels that had been built for city infrastructure, but repurposed by my wife's foresight. I put in the wireless earpiece Leora had given me before we left. Her voice came through immediately, clear and precise. Dad, I'm tracking all signals in the area. The Special Forces vehicles just breached penthouse main entrance. They'll realize you're gone in approximately 4 minutes. Good, I said. Let them waste time searching. There's something else. Leora's voice dropped, taking on that too human quality of concern that still unsettled me. I'm tracking her location signal. Sidonia's watch. She's heading toward the underground tunnel. The capsule rushed through darkness, dim green lights strobing past. Toward which tunnel? I asked, though I already knew the answer. This one, Leora whispered. She's moving an exact trajectory toward your exit point. Dad, someone has tipped her off. Only 4 people knew this tunnel existed. Rowena, who was dead. Clayton, who sat beside me. Leora, whose loyalty was programmed into her core. And Stuart Caldwell, my brother-in-law, who had helped build this escape route and knew every detail of its design. One of them had just betrayed me, and I knew exactly who it was. Lyora's voice came through crisp and analytical in my earpiece. 4 people know this tunnel exists, you, me, Clayton and Stuart Caldwell. Running probability analysis now. The capsule rushed through darkness electromagnetic rails, pulling us deeper beneath Singapore's surface. I could hear Leora processing data in real time, her digital mind, working through variables faster than any human could track. Stuart Caldwell sent encrypted coordinates to unknown recipient 23 minutes ago, Leora reported. Message originated from his personal device. Coordinates match this tunnel's exit point with 99.8% accuracy. Do we have a breach? Clayton turned to look at me, his bio-cyborg face showing the kind of controlled concern Rowena had programmed into his behavioral patterns. You knew he would do this, Clayton asked. I asked him to do it, I said. The capsule banked smoothly through another intersection. Green emergency lights strobed past the windows. Stuart Caldwell is Rowena's brother, I continued. Senior attorney, 47 years old. He spent 6 months convincing Sidoni he was her most trusted legal advisor, that he had turned against me for the right price. He's been feeding her information, building her confidence, making her believe she has an insider in my operation. And he's been yours the entire time, Clayton said. From the beginning, I confirmed. Stuart helped Rowena design this vault system. He knows every contingency she built. When I asked him to leak the tunnel coordinates, he knew exactly what I was doing, leading Sidoni exactly where I want her to go. Rowena had turned everyone I trusted into pieces on a chessboard I was only now beginning to see. Sidoni's watch signal has stopped moving, Leora reported. She's stationary, 200 meters from tunnel exit point holding position. She's smart, I said. She won't walk into an obvious trap. She'll wait, watch, try to anticipate my next move. Will she anticipate correctly? Clayton asked. No, I said, because she doesn't know what Rowena built down here. The capsule began to decelerate. The green emergency lights gave way to blue, then white, then the pure LED brightness of a destination marker. We slid to a stop so smoothly, I barely felt the transition from motion to stillness. The capsule door opened with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. We stepped out into a corridor, carved from reinforced concrete and titanium steel, 40 meters beneath Singapore Bay. The air was cooler here, regulated by systems that had been running independently for years. At the end of the corridor stood a door, massive, seamless, bearing an engraved family crest, identical to the ring Rowena had worn every day of our marriage. This is as far as I go, Clayton said. The vault only accepts her DNA and yours. She programmed it that way. I cannot enter. I approached the door. The family crest caught the LED light, a tree with roots as deep as its branches were high, the symbol Rowena's family had used for 3 generations of genetic research. My fingers traced the engraving cold steel under warm skin. The door hasn't been opened in 2 years, Clayton said quietly. Not since she sealed it 3 weeks before she died. I placed my palm flat against the biometric scanner beside the door. A beam of light ran along the lines of my hand, reading the unique pattern of my skin, the specific signature of my DNA that made me one of fewer than 50 people on Earth. The scanner hummed softly. Then the door began to rotate. It moved slowly, deliberately, like something waking from a long sleep. The seal broke with a sound like a breath being released. And then the air hit me. The scent hit me before the cold air did jasmine and bergamot, the perfume she wore every day for 30 years. It shouldn't have been possible. 2 years since anyone had been inside. 2 years since Rowena had walked these floors, touched these walls, breathed this air. Perfume molecules don't last that long. They fade, dissipate, vanish into chemical memory. But this was Rowena. She had planned for everything. I walked through the door into a circular room carved from solid rock. The ceiling arched 15 feet above, reinforced with titanium supports that could withstand pressure from the bay above and whatever else the world might throw at it. LED strips lined the walls, providing soft, even illumination that reminded me of the way Rowena used to light her laboratory, bright enough to work, soft enough to think. In the center of the room stood a glass pedestal. On the pedestal sat a leather-bound journal, the kind Rowena had used to document her research before everything went digital. Her handwriting was visible even from the doorway, precise, controlled, the script of someone who chose every word carefully. But it was the screen on the far wall that froze me. Rowena's face filled the display. Not old, not sick, not the woman I had watched die in a hospital bed, with tubes running from her arms and monitors tracking the virus that shut down her organs one by one. This was Rowena from years ago, maybe 5, maybe 7, healthy, vital, looking directly into the camera, as if she could see me standing here. The video was already playing. "If you're seeing this," she said, and her voice was exactly as I remembered it, clear, measured, carrying the kind of certainty that had made me fall in love with her 30 years ago. "Then everything I feared has happened." The vault door sealed behind me with a sound like a heartbeat stopping. Rowena's image didn't move, didn't blink, just stared directly at where I stood, as if she had calculated the exact position I would occupy when I finally entered this room. "You came here alone," she continued, "which means you couldn't trust anyone else with what's inside. You came here because Sidoni has made her move, and you need the weapon I built for you. You came here because I'm dead, and you need to hear what I learned before the virus took me." She leaned closer to the camera. "I discovered something 7 years ago," she whispered. "Something about our daughter that broke my heart. And I spent 3 years documenting it, building this defense, hoping I was wrong, hoping I could change her mind." A pause. Her eyes glistened. "I couldn't. So I built you this instead." The video kept playing and I couldn't move. I stood motionless in the center of that circular vault, unable to look away from Rowena's face as she began to tell me everything she had hidden for 7 years. Rowena Whitfield appeared on the screen as she had been at 52 years before the virus killed her. Her hair was still dark, then pulled back in the practical bun she wore when working late in the lab. Her eyes carried that sharp intelligence that had first drawn me to her 30 years ago, the look of someone who saw patterns others missed, who understood systems at depths most people never reached. But there was something else in her expression now, knowledge of her approaching end, and the weight of secrets she had carried alone. "7 years ago," she said, her voice filling the vault with the clarity of someone who had rehearsed these words until they were perfect. "I discovered she had taken your blood sample from the lab, our private facility, the one only you and I had access to." The screen behind her shifted, displaying surveillance footage I had never seen. Sidoni Younger, 26 years old, entering the lab at 3 in the morning. Her movements were confident, practiced. She knew exactly where the samples were stored. She bypassed security with access codes that should have been impossible for her to obtain. "I said nothing," Rowena continued, "because I needed to understand how deep this went, whether it was impulse or conspiracy, whether our daughter was confused or calculating." The footage showed Sidoni leaving the lab 14 minutes later, a small refrigerated case in her hand. "I watched her for 3 years," Rowena said. "Every secret meeting in Geneva with buyers whose names you would recognize. Every wire transfer to offshore accounts that disappeared into networks designed to hide money from governments. Every encrypted communication with people who specialize in exactly this kind of theft. 7 years. She had carried this knowledge alone for 7 years, while I lived in ignorant peace." More footage played. Sidonia in a Geneva hotel meeting with men in expensive suits. Sidoni in a Zurich bank signing documents I couldn't read from the surveillance angle. Sidoni in Dubai, shaking hands with someone whose face had been deliberately blurred in the recording. "I documented everything," Rowena said, "because I thought," her voice caught slightly, the only break in her composed delivery, "I thought I could convince her to change. I believed maternal love could overcome greed, that if I showed her the evidence, explained the consequences, reminded her of who she used to be before the money corrupted her. She stopped, looked directly at the camera. I was wrong. The vault felt colder. Or maybe that was just my blood turning to ice as I understood how thoroughly my wife had known our daughter's betrayal and chosen to face it alone. I confronted her 6 months before I got sick, Rowena said. Showed her everything I had collected, begged her to stop. She looked at me with eyes that held nothing, no love, no regret, no recognition of the child she had been. And she said, "Mom, you built your career on genetics. You should understand this better than anyone. I'm simply following my nature." The screen went dark for a moment. When it returned, Rowena was leaning closer to the camera, her expression shifting from grief to determination. "So I built you this," she said. "Every piece of evidence is in this vault. Every transaction, every communication, every meeting documented with timestamps and witness verification. Everything you need to destroy her legally before she destroys you physically." She paused, then gestured slightly off camera. "The leather journal on the pedestal contains my handwritten timeline, dates, locations, dollar amounts. But you'll notice one page is missing, torn." I turned to look at the glass pedestal. The journal sat there exactly as she described, and I could see even from this distance the rough edge where a page had been ripped out, not carefully removed, torn hastily, as if in pain or urgent necessity. What secret could be too dangerous to write down, but safe enough to whisper to a daughter who would die 6 years later? "I tore that page myself," Rowena said, her voice dropping to something quieter, more intimate. "Because the contents of that page only Leora knows. I told her directly, programmed it into her core memory in a way no one can access without her consent." Leora's voice came through my earpiece, barely above a whisper. "Dad," she said, "I know what that page says." I looked around the vault, seeing her hologram materialize beside me in three-dimensional light. She stood there in her jeans and gray sweater, looking exactly as she had at 27, and her expression carried something I had never seen in any AI construct: fear. "But it's not the right time yet," Leora continued. "Mom was very specific. I can only tell you when—" She stopped mid-sentence. Her hologram flickered. "When what?" I asked. Leora was silent. Her projection stabilized the blue light of her form, casting shadows on the vault's curved walls. The air still carried that impossible scent of jasmine and bergamot, Rowena's perfume lingering like a promise or a ghost. On the screen, Rowena's video had paused on her face, frozen mid-breath, waiting for me to finish watching whenever I was ready. But I couldn't look away from Leora, because her hologram trembled, not the flicker of a bad connection or degraded projection quality, not the stutter of processing delays or bandwidth limitations. This was something else entirely, a physical response that looked exactly like a human body reacting to stress, to fear, to the weight of keeping a secret that hurt to hold. I had watched AI systems for decades, built security protocols around their limitations, understood exactly what digital constructs could and couldn't do. They couldn't tremble. Code doesn't shiver. Algorithms don't shake. Light doesn't experience emotion. But Leora's hologram trembled again, just for a fraction of a second. And in that impossible moment, I began to understand what Rowena had really done. She hadn't built an AI to simulate our daughter. She had done something else entirely. Before I could ask about the trembling, Leora's form shifted her hologram, expanding into a three-dimensional display of our corporate headquarters, layers peeling back like transparent skin. "I'm accessing the architectural database," she said, her voice returning to that analytical tone that almost made me forget she had just trembled like something alive. "Comparing current structure against original construction blueprints from 12 years ago." The holographic building rotated slowly in the vault's blue light, each floor rendered in precise detail. I could see the executive suites on the top levels, the research laboratories in the middle floors, the secure storage areas beneath ground level. Then Leora highlighted something that shouldn't exist. "Floor B3, she said. Not in the original blueprints, added over the past 2 years during what corporate records list as routine maintenance windows. The display zoomed into the hidden floor. What I saw made my blood run cold. A laboratory. Not the kind used for standard research or quality testing. This was equipped to the level of a military defense research facility, hermetically sealed rooms, advanced refrigeration systems, biometric security that rivaled anything in my most classified divisions. And test tubes, hundreds of them. 847 test tubes, Lyora reported, all labeled with your genome designation, all dated within the last 18 months. The hologram zoomed closer, and I could read the labels clearly now. Each one marked in precise clinical script, Whitfield genomic sample, RH null, phase 3. Phase 3, not phase 1, not initial testing. She had been doing this for years. She doesn't want to sell it, Dad, Leora said quietly. She wants to become it. 847 attempts to become something that wasn't human anymore. The realization hit me like physical weight. All this time I had assumed Sidonie was building a network to auction my genetic material to the highest bidder organizations that would pay billions for the secret to extended life disease resistance cellular regeneration. A criminal enterprise, yes, but one driven by greed. This was something else entirely. This was obsession. Show me everything, I said. Leora's display shifted, pulling up file after file from the Lab B3 servers. Research notes documenting injection protocols. Failed experiments marked with clinical detachment. Success rate calculations showing gradual improvement over time. Sidonie had been systematic, methodical, treating her own body modification like a corporate project with milestones and quarterly objectives. And then Leora showed me something that made the vault's temperature-controlled air feel like ice in my lungs. A hospital record. 6 years old. Lyora Whitfield. Age 27. Cause of death, immune system failure, unknown viral origin. I was looking at my daughter's autopsy report through the eyes of my daughter's ghost. That's my hospital record, Leora said, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 years ago, the doctors listed it as unknown origin because they couldn't identify the pathogen. The hologram pulled up a deleted file recovered from corrupted hospital servers. A handwritten note from a physician who had been removed from the case 3 days before Leora died. Virus sample analyzed. Conclusion, not natural origin. Source artificial laboratory synthesis. Recommend immediate investigation. The note had been deleted within hours of being written. The physician had been transferred to a hospital in rural Indonesia 2 weeks later. The investigation had never happened because someone with money and connections had made sure it disappeared. Leora, I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself. Show me Lab B3 again. The test tubes. Close up. The hologram shifted back to the laboratory. The rows of refrigerated samples appeared in perfect detail, each one labeled and dated with clinical precision. Leora zoomed in on the section marked Archive, Historical Attempts, and there in the back row was a test tube that looked older than the others. The label was handwritten, not printed. The script was distinctive, elegant loops on the capital letters, the specific way the W in Whitfield curved at the bottom. Sidonie Whitfield's handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards, on corporate memos, on the note she left when she moved out of the family home at 25. I knew that handwriting as well as I knew my own. The label read, First Experiment, Lyora Whitfield 6 years ago. Failed. Subject expired. Not used anymore. Sidonie Whitfield's work appeared in the evidence before me, my 33-year-old eldest daughter's distinctive handwriting, labeling the test tube that had killed her own sister, clinical notes, documenting murder as if it were science. She had tested the genome modification on Leora first, her own younger sister, before anyone else, before the 847 attempts that followed, before the systematic research and controlled protocols. Sidonie had injected Leora with an experimental virus designed to force my Rh null genes into foreign tissue. And when it failed, when Lyora's immune system collapsed, and her organs shut down one by one over the course of 3 weeks. Sidoni had marked it as subject expired and moved on to the next phase. I didn't know, Leora whispered, her holographic form flickering. When I was dying, I thought it was just random, bad luck. The doctors said unknown origin, and I believed them. I never knew she. Her voice broke. I turned to look at her projection, this ghost made of light and code and something else that Rowena had built. Leora stood there in her gray sweater and jeans, looking exactly as she had 6 years ago when I sat beside her hospital bed and held her hand while she died, while she was murdered, and I watched digital tears fall from her holographic face. Not a glitch, not a rendering error. Actual tears, pixel-perfect recreations of grief streaming down light and code tracking down her cheeks exactly the way real tears would fall on real skin. I doesn't cry. Programs don't mourn their own murders. But Leora was crying. I reached toward her projection, forgetting for a moment that she was light, that my hand would pass through empty air. She looked at me through the tears, and her expression carried something I had never seen in any artificial intelligence, any simulation, any digital construct. Real grief, real horror, real understanding of what had been done to her. Mom programmed this too, Dad, she whispered through the tears. She programmed me to feel this, to cry when I saw the truth, to understand that my sister murdered me. Digital tears fell in the vault's blue light, and I stood there watching my dead daughter cry over her own autopsy report, because Rowena had known exactly what I would need to see. After Leora's tears faded, I sat alone in that vault and faced the truth I had been avoiding for 6 years. I was not just a victim of my daughter's plan. I was an accomplice. The vault's blue emergency lighting cast long shadows across the circular walls. Rowena's video had paused on the screen, frozen on her face, waiting for me to continue watching. The leather journal sat untouched on its glass pedestal, and I sat on the cold titanium floor with my back against the wall, finally allowing myself to remember what I had spent 6 years trying to forget. Leora died on a Tuesday in March. Immune system failure, the doctors said. Unknown viral origin. They ran every test, consulted every specialist, and found nothing that explained why a perfectly healthy 27-year-old woman's body suddenly turned against itself. I had doubts even then. Small things. Inconsistencies that didn't add up if you looked too closely. The way Sidoni had visited Leora's hospital room alone the day before she got sick, something she never did. They weren't close, hadn't been for years. The sudden interest Sidoni showed in my medical records 2 weeks after the funeral, asking questions about genetic inheritance that seemed academic until now. The unexplained trips to Geneva she started taking monthly, always with vague explanations about legal consultations that I never questioned. I chose not to ask, because asking would have meant acknowledging that my surviving daughter might have killed my dead one. Because asking would have shattered the fragile peace I was clinging to after losing my wife's sister and watching my family disintegrate. Because asking would have required me to act, to investigate, to confront truths I wasn't ready to face. So I stayed silent. How many fathers choose comfort over truth, when the truth might destroy what little family they have left? My silence gave her 6 more years. 6 years to refine the technique that failed with Leora. 6 years to build Lab B3, to perfect the genome modification protocols, to establish the network of buyers who would pay billions for what she was creating. 6 years to plan this final extraction, with the precision of someone who had learned from every mistake. She started with murder, and I gave her time to turn it into science. I wasn't a victim. I was an accomplice who chose denial over accountability, comfort over courage, willful blindness over the moral obligation to see. Rowena had known. That's why she spent 3 years documenting everything in secret. Because she understood that I wouldn't act on suspicion alone, that I needed irrefutable proof before I could accept what our daughter had become. She had known me better than I knew myself. Dad, Leora's voice came through my earpiece, pulling me back from the spiral of self-recrimination. I've found something you need to see. Her hologram materialized in front of me no longer. Crying, her projection stabilized back into analytical mode. The three-dimensional display shifted to show a different kind of screen, dark web interface, encrypted marketplace. The kind of digital black market where governments bought weapons and corporations traded secrets. At the center of the display, an auction listing. Whitfield Genomic Package, RH Null Complete Sequence, Lot 001. Below it, a number that made everything suddenly terribly clear. Current bid $5,000, 00000 US dollars. $5 billion. Three active bidders. Lyora reported, her voice carrying that clinical precision that helped me focus. Primary bidder is an unnamed pharmaceutical consortium based in Switzerland. Secondary bidder appears to be a Chinese state-backed research institute operating through shell companies. Third bidder identity obscured, but payment routing suggests Middle Eastern sovereign wealth fund. The display showed bid history climbing steadily over the past 18 months. It had started at 500 million and crept upward as word spread about what was being offered. Not just genome data, not just research notes or tissue samples, living extraction, complete sequence, guaranteed fresh. They were bidding on me. Auction closes at 1800 hours today, Leora continued. 6 p.m. exactly. That's 5 hours and 58 minutes from now. The pieces fell into perfect, horrible alignment. Sidoni didn't need to kill me for the genome alone. She had been working on that for years, perfecting the extraction and modification process. But the auction added a specific deadline, a moment when the package had to be delivered, or the $5 billion payday would disappear to whoever else could provide what the bidders wanted. She needed my genes before 6 p.m. tonight. That's why the special forces surrounded my building at 3:14 this morning. That's why the deepfake massacre footage aired at precisely 8:02. That's why Lloyd Connolly called pretending to be police, trying to lure me into custody, where extraction could happen cleanly, quietly, with legal cover. Every move had been calculated around a single deadline. 6 p.m. She's been planning this specific day for months, I said quietly. Based on communication patterns I've intercepted, yes, Leora confirmed. February 14th was always the target date. The auction was scheduled first, then everything else built backward from that deadline. I stood up slowly, my muscles stiff from sitting on the cold floor. The vault suddenly felt less like a refuge, and more like what it actually was, a waiting room before the final confrontation. Show me the vault exterior, I said. Leora's display shifted to real-time monitoring. Heat signatures bloomed on the thermal scan, multiple figures positioning equipment against the outer titanium door. Industrial cutting tools, military-grade breaching gear, the kind of hardware that could cut through reinforced steel if given enough time. She found the vault, Lyora said. Stewart's leak worked. She's setting up now. A countdown appeared on the screen in cold red numbers. 5:58:00 until auction close. 0:40:00 until vault breach. 40 minutes until Sidoni cut through the door her mother had designed to protect me. Less than 6 hours until the auction closed, and $5 billion transferred to whoever delivered my living body to the waiting bidders. Leora's voice turned cold and precise, stripped of the emotion Rowena had programmed into her grief. You have 5 hours, 58 minutes left to decide, Dad, she said. She's breaking through the vault door in 40. I watched the heat signatures move with practiced efficiency outside the vault. My daughter and her team working with industrial equipment to reach me. The numbers counting down on every screen. No more time for blame. No more room for denial or regret. Only time for action. The secure phone rang, the one with encryption so deep that only 3 people in the world had the number, and Stuart Caldwell's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. Stuart, I provided the coordinates as you instructed, he said without preamble. His voice carried the controlled tension of someone playing a role so deep that discovery meant death. She believes I'm hers. Completely. Tracking devices installed in all vehicles, plus her entire legal team's phones. I can see every movement she makes. I listened to the sound of Singapore traffic in the background of his call. He was mobile careful, making sure no one could overhear. The financial trap? I asked. 800 million in escrow, Stewart confirmed. I convinced her it was standard procedure for international transactions of this magnitude protection against regulatory seizure. Dual signature required for release. Mine and hers. Say the word and I freeze it all. She'll be financially crippled before she knows what happened. $800 million. Not all of Sidoni's assets, but enough to destroy her ability to operate, to pay the mercenaries, to maintain the network of people who only stayed loyal because she could afford their silence. Good, I said. There was a pause. Then Stewart's voice dropped lower, more personal. Brother. He said a term he used rarely, only when speaking of family rather than business. I know what happened to Rowena, my sister. I know what Sidoni did. Rowena's brother had spent 2 years preparing to destroy the daughter who killed his sister. When this is over, Stewart continued, when we've stopped her, I need you to know this wasn't just about protecting you. This was about making sure she answers for what she did to my family. I know, I said quietly. The vault breach is proceeding on schedule, Stewart reported, shifting back to tactical information. She has industrial cutting equipment. Based on door thickness and cutting speed, I estimate 35 minutes until first breach, another 20 until she can physically enter. You have less than an hour. Understood. I ended the call. Leora's hologram flickered beside me, her projection brighter than before, as if she was drawing more power from the vault systems. Dad, she said, I've detected something. A second vault layer. Even Clayton didn't know it existed. The holographic display shifted, showing a structural scan of the vault. Behind the main chamber where I stood hidden within what looked like solid reinforced concrete was another space. Smaller, more heavily shielded. Requires dual authentication, Leora explained. Your DNA palm scan plus something else. An audio authentication I can't access without the specific voice pattern. What voice? I asked. Mom's, Leora said softly. She programmed this layer to open only when your DNA is confirmed and her voice speaks a specific phrase. The phrase she said to you every night. I knew immediately what she meant. 30 years of marriage. Every single night before we slept, no matter where we were in our home, in hotels, during business travel, in hospital rooms when one of us was sick, Rowena would say the same 3 words. Honey, I love you. 3 words she had said 10,000 times, now the key to proving her murder. Lyora, I said, play the archived recording. Her hologram shifted, accessing memory banks I hadn't known existed. When Leora's voice emerged from the vault speakers, it wasn't Leora speaking. It was Rowena. Honey, I love you. The vault systems recognized the voice pattern instantly. A section of the rear wall began to rotate, revealing a chamber no larger than a closet. LED lights activated automatically, illuminating a medical-grade refrigeration unit built into the wall. I approached slowly, my footsteps echoing in the circular space. The refrigeration unit's glass door showed its contents clearly. A single vial medical suspension fluid maintaining perfect preservation, labeled in Rowena's distinctive handwriting. I opened the refrigeration door. Cold air spilled out, carrying the sterile smell of medical-grade preservation chemicals. The vial rested in a foam cradle designed to prevent any movement, any degradation. I lifted it carefully, holding it up to the LED light. Rowena's blood. Preserved 2 years ago, in the final weeks of her life, when she was still strong enough to extract her own sample, still clear-headed enough to label it properly, still determined enough to turn her own dying body into evidence. Through the glass, I could see faint chemical striations, markers that shouldn't be there in healthy blood. Compounds that didn't belong. Chemical analysis complete. Lyora said, her hologram displaying molecular structures I recognized from years of biometric research. Neurotoxin compound. Slow acting. Designed to mimic natural immune system failure. The same compound found in the deleted medical file from my death. The same poison, used on both daughters 6 years apart. Sidoni had refined the technique with Leora, then used it on Rowena when her mother discovered what she had done. Murdered her own sister to test the method. Murdered her own mother to silence the witness. The vial felt impossibly heavy in my hand. Rowena's handwriting on the label was steady, deliberate, written with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what was happening to her. No shaking, no fear, just clear documentation of the evidence she needed me to find. She had spent her final weeks dying from poison while documenting the proof of who killed her. She had built this entire vault, the hidden layers, the voice authentication, the preservation systems, knowing she wouldn't live to see me use it. Knowing I would stand here exactly as I was standing now, holding physical evidence of her murder in my hands. Something inside my chest broke and mended at the same time. Grief and rage, love and vengeance, sorrow and determination, all of it crystallizing around the cold glass vial in my palm. Rowena had turned her own death into evidence, had transformed her murder into a weapon I could use, had spent her final days building the infrastructure that would ensure Sidoni couldn't escape justice, even if I initially chose denial. She had known me so completely that she planned for my weakness and built around it. Dad, Leora whispered, her hologram standing beside me in that small refrigerated chamber. There's more. Behind the blood sample. A data chip. I looked back into the refrigeration unit. There, in a second foam cradle I had missed, sat a small chip labeled in Rowena's handwriting, Inheritance Protocol. Activation required. She had turned her own murder into evidence I could hold in my hand. I placed Rowena's blood sample back in its refrigerated cradle and turned toward the terminal at the vault's center, the screen that would either save everything she died protecting or condemn it to darkness. The data chip felt impossibly small in my palm. Light, almost weightless. But it contained the mechanism that would decide whether Rowena's death meant something or disappeared into the same silence that had swallowed Leora's murder for 6 years. I inserted the chip into the terminal's reader. The screen lit immediately, displaying an interface I had never seen before. Clean, precise. Unmistakably Rowena's design aesthetic, function over form, clarity over decoration. Inheritance protocol. 2-layer authentication required. Leora said, her hologram materializing beside the terminal. Your biometrics plus my confirmation. Neither of us can activate it alone. Mom designed it that way to prevent coercion. The screen displayed the requirements. Full biometric scan, retina, DNA, voice pattern. All three had to match my records simultaneously. And then Leora would have to confirm, representing Rowena's programmed will. No one could force me to activate it at gunpoint, because they would also need to compel an AI that couldn't be threatened. What happens when it starts? I asked. 4 minutes, Leora said. Irreversible countdown. All Rowan Initiative documents, Rowena's murder evidence, your lab records, dark web auction proof, everything transmits to exactly 847 pre-selected channels simultaneously. Global media, legal authorities, ethics boards, regulatory agencies, 847 channels. Rowena had spent years building the list, choosing exactly who needed to see the truth. Can it be stopped? I asked. No, Leora said flatly. Once the countdown starts, nothing can pause it, cancel it, or interrupt it. 4 minutes to complete transmission. After that, the truth is everywhere. 4 minutes to either honor Rowena's sacrifice or render her death meaningless. There's something else, Leora continued. Her hologram displayed molecular structures I recognized from Rowena's genetic research. Mom built in a genetic backlash mechanism. Anyone holding illegally obtained genome samples, anyone who injected your genes into their system, will experience accelerated cellular aging. I stared at the molecular diagrams. The genome recognizes unauthorized integration, Leora explained. Mom coded it that way. Self-destruct protocol. Anyone who forced your genes into their body without consent will age rapidly. Years compressed into hours. It will destroy Sidoni's modifications from the inside. Rowena had turned my own genetic code into a weapon against theft. How long, I asked. Depends on exposure level, Leora said. Based on Sidoni's injection history from Lab B3 records, approximately 12 to 18 hours until complete cellular breakdown. Not fatal, but devastating. She'll lose everything the modifications gave her. The terminal screen pulsed softly, waiting for my decision. Before I could respond, another communication channel opened. Military-grade encryption. A voice I hadn't heard in person for 3 years came through the vault's speakers. Harlan, my brother said. It's Dwight. Dwight Whitfield, 52 years old. Former Navy SEAL commander who had spent 20 years in special operations before retiring to work in private security. My younger brother, who had disappeared 3 years ago, telling me he was taking a contract in Southeast Asia and would be out of contact. Now I understood where he had actually been. 7 nanopoints armed. Dwight reported, his voice carrying the clipped precision of someone running tactical operations. 3 years of placement. Server farms, satellite uplinks, backup facilities. When you activate the protocol, I detonate 30 seconds into your countdown. 3 years of preparation compressed into 30 seconds of synchronized destruction. Their infrastructure goes dark, Dwight continued. No jamming capability, no signal interception, no way to block your transmission before it reaches all 847 destinations. Your data gets through clean. Rowena had recruited my brother. Had sent him to spend 3 years methodically planting explosives in 7 strategic locations across the organization's infrastructure. Had turned him into the tactical instrument that would ensure her evidence couldn't be stopped. Dwight, I said quietly, you've been there this whole time. Since Rowena asked me, he confirmed. 6 months before she died. She told me what Sidoni had done, showed me the evidence, asked if I would help her build something that couldn't fail. I could hear Singapore traffic in the background of his transmission. He was mobile, positioning himself for the final phase. She was my sister-in-law, Dwight said, his voice softening slightly. Leora was my niece. When Rowena showed me what Sidoni did to them both, I didn't hesitate. 3 years of my life to make sure that murdering bitch can't escape justice. That's not a sacrifice, brother. That's an honor. The vault felt smaller suddenly. Or maybe it was just the weight of understanding how many people Rowena had recruited. How many years she had spent building this trap, how many pieces had to align perfectly for it to work. Brother, Dwight said, and I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard since we were children. Absolute certainty. Whatever happens after this, whatever it costs us both, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Rowena would be too. The transmission cut out, leaving only static and the hum of the vault's environmental systems. I stood at the terminal inheritance protocol, waiting for my biometric scan, Rowena's blood sample preserved in refrigeration behind me, Leora's hologram flickering beside the screen. Everything was ready. Then, Leora's projection shifted her holographic form, expanding to show heat signature, tracking real-time movement analysis of the area surrounding the vault. Red indicators appeared on the display, multiple figures, industrial equipment, coordinated positioning. Her voice cut through the silence, clinical and precise. She's 800 meters from the vault entrance, Leora reported. 22 minutes until breach. The trap was set, but Sidoni was already inside it. I turned back to the screen where Rowena waited, frozen in the moment before speaking. And I knew that whatever she was about to tell me would be the hardest truth of all. I pressed play. Rowena's face filled the display, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight I had only heard once before, the night she told me Leora had died. I discovered the medication swap 3 weeks before I died, she said. The taste was different, subtle, chemical. I'm a scientist, Harlan. I noticed these things. The screen showed laboratory reports I had never seen. Secret analysis from an independent facility. Toxicology data comparing her prescribed medication to what she was actually taking. Neurotoxin substitution. Complete molecular replacement. I ran my own tests, Rowena continued. confirmed what I already knew. Sidoni had been systematically poisoning me for weeks, maybe months. The same compound she used on Leora. Refined, more efficient. My hands were shaking. I didn't notice until I looked down and saw my fingers trembling against my legs. "I didn't tell you," Rowena said, and her eyes glistened with tears. She hadn't allowed herself to cry when this was recorded. "Because I knew what you would do. You would have confronted her, tried to save me, destroyed the trap before it was complete." She leaned closer to the camera, "and she would have killed you instead." I stood frozen in that vault 40 meters beneath Singapore Bay, watching my wife explain why she chose to die. "This was my choice," she said firmly, "not yours. I had 3 weeks to decide. 3 weeks to weigh my life against the trap we'd been building for 7 years, against the evidence we'd collected, against the certainty that if I acted too soon, Sidoni would adapt, escape, and eventually kill you for the genome she wanted. She had spent 3 weeks dying slowly, knowing exactly who was killing her, saying nothing to protect me. I chose the trap," Rowena said. "I chose to let it complete. I chose to die so you could live long enough to activate what I built. Because love isn't always about saving someone in the moment. Sometimes it's about saving them years later, when they don't even know they need it." The screen showed her taking a breath, steadying herself. "When the protocol activates, the genetic backlash will destroy anyone holding illegally obtained samples," she said. "Don't try to stop it. Don't feel guilty about what it does to Sidoni. This is my gift to you, Harlan. Not your burden. My choice. My sacrifice. My love turned into the most powerful weapon I could build." The video paused again, waiting for me to continue. But before I could process what she had said, every screen in the vault flooded red. Warning alerts, breach detection, tactical analysis scrolling faster than I could read. Leora's hologram materialized instantly, her projection sharp with urgency. "Dad," she said, her voice stripped of everything except clinical precision. "Warning, outer titanium door breach in 35 minutes. They're using military-grade plasma cutting equipment. Exceeds civilian specifications by significant margin." The display showed heat signatures outside the vault. Industrial equipment I recognized from defense contracts. The kind of hardware governments use to breach reinforced bunkers. "My initial projection was wrong," Leora continued. "They're cutting 12 minutes faster than expected. Recalculating timeline now. 35 minutes between justice and obliteration." Numbers appeared on every screen. Breach progression analysis. Layer-by-layer penetration estimates. The outer titanium door would fall in 35 minutes. Then 4 interior DNA-locked layers remained, each progressively thinner, each falling faster as the cutting equipment heated and the operators gained rhythm. "Protocol requires 4 minutes uninterrupted countdown after activation," Leora said. "You must activate before she reaches the 4th interior layer. After that point, she might breach the terminal room before transmission completes." The mathematics were brutal and clear. 35 minutes until outer door failure. 4 minutes needed for protocol. That left a 31-minute window to make the decision to place my hand on the scanner, to let Leora confirm, to start the countdown that couldn't be stopped. 31 minutes to decide whether to honor my wife's death or find another way. "She's moving faster than we planned," Leora said. "Military contractors, professional breach team. They know what they're doing." I looked at the countdown burning red across the screens. 3500, 3458, 3456. Everything was ready. Stewart had trapped 800 million in escrow. Dwight had 7 nano-explosives armed and synchronized. The protocol interface waited for my biometric scan. Rowena's evidence sat preserved in refrigeration. 847 channels stood ready to receive the truth. All I had to do was press my hand against the scanner and let it begin. But I stood there looking at the terminal, then back at Rowena's paused video, and realized there was one thing I still needed to do before pressing that button. something Rowena's trap hadn't accounted for, something that had nothing to do with evidence or justice or tactical superiority, something only a father could understand. Leora, I said quietly. How close is Sidoni right now? 700 meters, Leora reported, holding position while her team sets up cutting equipment. Can you get me a direct communication line to her? Leora's hologram flickered. Dad, that would compromise operational security. She'll know you're aware of the breach. She'll know you're watching. Good, I said. I want her to know. Why? I looked at the countdown. 3412, falling. Because before I activate this protocol, I said, before I destroy everything she's built and trigger the genetic backlash that will ruin her body, before I turn her into evidence and send proof of her murders to 847 destinations around the world, I need to talk to my daughter. Leora was silent for a moment. Rowena wouldn't have wanted this, she said softly. I know, I said. But Rowena built a trap. I'm still a father. The countdown kept falling. 33:45, 33:42. Open the line, I said. I picked up the encrypted phone and dialed the number I had programmed 2 years ago, but never called my daughter Sidoni's private line, the one she didn't know I had access to. The line connected on the second ring. Video activated automatically. The screen filled with Sidoni's face, and for a moment I forgot she was trying to kill me because all I saw was the little girl who used to bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. Then I noticed what she was wearing. A blood-red designer suit. Perfectly tailored. The kind of statement piece worn by people who wanted to be remembered. Behind her, I could see the vault entrance, massive titanium door, glowing orange where plasma cutters were already working. Industrial equipment throwing sparks into the underground corridor. She smiled when she saw me. You're watching, she said. Not a question, a statement. I knew you were. Good. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Confident, measured. The voice of someone who had built presentations for corporate boards and negotiated billion-dollar contracts. The voice of a daughter I used to know. I'm not angry with you, Sidoni, I said. That stopped her. I watched the micro-expression flash across her face, confusion, suspicion, the first crack in confidence before she recovered. You should be, she said carefully. Should I? I adjusted my position in the vault, making sure she could see the terminal behind me. The screens displaying countdowns she couldn't read from her angle. I've had 8 months to be angry. But anger is exhausting, and I'm 55 years old. I'd rather spend my energy on something more productive. She tilted her head slightly, studying me through the camera. You have 35 minutes, I said calmly. I also have 35 minutes. Let's see who uses their time better. For the first time in 8 months, I wasn't the one being hunted. Sidoni's expression shifted not to fear, but to something sharper. Recognition. Understanding that the dynamic had changed, that whatever she thought she knew about this situation had just been rewritten. Interesting, she said softly. Isn't it? I replied. We stared at each other through encrypted video, father and daughter separated by 40 meters of reinforced earth and titanium, both waiting for the other to make the next move. She broke first. I'll see you soon, Dad, she said. The screen went dark. I set the phone down and turned to Leora. Show me the vault defense architecture, I said. Her hologram expanded into three-dimensional display of the vault's security layers. What I saw made me understand exactly how much thought Rowena had put into buying time. 5 concentric doors. Not one massive barrier, but 5 progressively smaller ones, each requiring different DNA authentication protocols. The outer titanium door Sidoni was cutting through right now was just the beginning. Behind it waited 4 more layers, bio-locked barriers designed to recognize specific genetic markers, reject any substitution, and slow breach attempts exponentially. Each layer requires different authentication, Lyora explained. Retina scan, blood sample, voice pattern, skin cell analysis, full genome mapping. Mom designed exponential delay. Even with plasma cutters, each interior door takes progressively longer to bypass because they have to work around the biolock without triggering permanent seal. It was brilliant. Rowena had built a vault that used my own genetic uniqueness as its primary defense. Every door recognized what made me irreplaceable and rejected anything else. How long, I asked. If they cut through all 5 doors manually, 43 minutes minimum, Lyora said. But she paused, and her holographic form flickered in that way that meant she was about to deliver bad news. Someone in her team carries sophisticated fake DNA sample, Lyora said. Matches your biometric signature closely enough to fool 2 of the interior layers, can bypass them without cutting. That accelerates timeline to 32 minutes total. The hands that had held my wife's as she died were about to help harvest my spine. I felt my jaw tighten. Who, I asked. Leora's display shifted to the vault exterior camera feed, zoomed in on the figures standing behind Sidonio. Breach team members in tactical gear, technical specialists monitoring cutting equipment, and they're slightly back from the others holding a case I recognized as medical-grade biological storage. A man I knew, Dr. Darren Simmons, 44 years old, our family physician for 15 years. The doctor who had treated my children's flu, who had recommended specialists for Rowena's mysterious illness, who had sat beside her hospital bed explaining treatment options with gentle bedside manner while administering poison disguised as medication. The same man who had attended Rowena's memorial service 2 years ago, who had offered condolences with tears in his eyes, who had asked if there was anything at all he could do to help during this difficult time. Now he stood behind my daughter holding biological extraction equipment designed to harvest living tissue from unwilling subjects. Dr. Simmons, Leora confirmed. Facial recognition complete. Medical license verified. Specialized in genetic sampling procedures. Based on communication intercepts, he's been providing Sidoni with biological consultation for at least 4 years. 4 years. Since before Leora died. I stared at his face on the camera feed. He looked the same as he always had, professional, composed, the kind of physician patients trusted because he listened carefully and never rushed appointments. The kind of doctor who remembered your family's birthdays and asked about your grandchildren. The kind of doctor who could swap medication without anyone noticing because he had been prescribing it for years. He administered Rowena's medication in the final weeks, I said quietly. Confirmed, Lyora said. Hospital records show he made 17 visits to her room. 14 of those visits included direct medication administration. He had complete access. I watched Dr. Simmons on the screen checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. The same hands that had held Rowena's trembling fingers while she died. The same gentle touch he had used to comfort patients for 15 years. Now preparing to extract genetic material from my living body. He had been part of this from the beginning. Lyora's analysis completed in 3 seconds, voice pattern speech, cadence, linguistic fingerprints, all matching archived recordings from before Lloyd Connolly's supposed death 3 years ago. Voice analysis complete, Lyora reported. 99.7% match. Lloyd Connolly, alive, providing deepfake quantum processing technology to Sidoni's operation. The screen displayed Lloyd's face from corporate records 4 years ago, overlaid with thermal imaging from this morning's fake police call. Same man, same voice, same person who had supposedly burned to death in a private jet over the Java Sea. He faked his death to escape Interpol investigation into corporate fraud. Lyora continued pulling up files I had never seen. Assumed identity. Living in Dubai under the name Marcus Henley. He's been personally orchestrating the headquarters attack footage, the deep fake of you entering the building. His quantum processing lab provided the technology. I stared at the evidence scrolling across the screens. Lloyd had been my business partner for 8 years, had signed contracts worth billions, had been best man at my wedding to Rowena, and he had spent 3 years helping my daughter plan my murder. Execute financial strike, I said. Leora's hologram shifted into pure computational mode, her projection flickering as processing power surged. Executing now, she said. $340 million across 7 jurisdictions. freezing. The screens filled with financial data moving faster than I could track. Accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore, Dubai, Monaco, Hong Kong, Liechtenstein. Lloyd's hidden wealth carefully distributed, protected by shell companies and legal structures designed to be untraceable. Rowena had found them all. 3 seconds. That's how long it took to lock every account simultaneously, to freeze $340 million with coordinated legal orders executed across 7 countries at once. The conspiracy that had stolen 2 years of my life was unraveling $340 million at a time. Accounts locked, Lyora confirmed. Interpol has been automatically notified of Marcus Henley's true identity. Dubai police receiving arrest warrant now. On one of the subsidiary screens, I watched Lloyd's encrypted phone light up with incoming calls. Financial institutions, lawyers, business partners suddenly unable to access funds they thought were secure. No one was answering his desperate attempts to understand what had just happened. First strike complete, Leora said quietly. Stewart's $800 million, Lloyd's $340 million, $1.14 billion frozen in under 4 minutes. I turned away from the financial displays and looked at the small writing desk in the corner of the vault. Rowena had installed it there, a simple wooden surface with a single drawer completely out of place in a room designed for digital warfare. But Rowena had known that some things couldn't be said through screens or code. Before I tell you about the letter I wrote to my daughter, I need you to make a choice. Comment A, if you think I should have activated the protocol immediately, or B, if you think talking to Sidoni first was right. Add one short reason so I can see how you're reading this. A quick note. What follows contains some recreated emotional details for narrative depth, though the core message remains what I hope stays with you. I sat down at the desk and opened the drawer. Inside was exactly what I knew would be there: cream-colored paper-heavy stock, the kind used for important correspondence, and a fountain pen, the same brand Rowena had used for 30 years. How do you write goodbye to a daughter you're about to destroy, to save everything she tried to take? I uncapped the pen and began. The first line came easily, because it was the truth. I held you for the first time when you were 3 hours old, and your fingers were so small they barely wrapped around my thumb. The rest flowed from there. Memories I had buried under 8 months of strategic planning and controlled rage. Sidoni, at age 3, struggling to pronounce dad for weeks until the morning she finally said it clearly, and my heart melted. Age 7, bringing me drawings from school that I still had stored in a box somewhere. Age 12, asking questions about business that showed she understood numbers better than most adults. Every moment proving I had loved her completely before greed consumed who she used to be. I wrote about the day she graduated university, how proud Rowena and I had been. The first contract she negotiated independently, demonstrating skills that surpassed my own at that age. The potential she had shown before the genome became more valuable than family. The pen moved across the paper with Rowena's steady rhythm, and I realized I was writing the way she would have written, measured, deliberate, choosing each word to carry exact meaning. The final paragraph was the hardest. I don't hate you, Sidoni. I need you to understand that. I only regret that you chose wealth over the only people who loved you, without condition, without calculation, without measuring your worth in dollars or genetic code. Your mother built this trap not from vengeance but from necessity. Now I must let it run its course, not because I want to punish you, but because it's the only right thing left to do. You killed your sister to test a technique. You killed your mother to silence a witness. And I cannot let those deaths mean nothing. I'm sorry it had to end this way. I'm sorry I couldn't save you from yourself. But most of all, I'm sorry you'll never know how much we loved you before you made us choose between justice and family. I signed it simply Dad. The ink dried slowly on the cream paper. I folded the letter carefully, creasing each edge with the precision Rowena would have approved of, and slipped it into my jacket pocket, directly over my heart. Leora's hologram flickered beside me, and when she spoke, her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. 18 minutes, Dad, she said. First door breach in 18 minutes. Time to decide if I would activate the protocol before she reached me. The vault shuddered a low vibration that traveled through titanium walls and steel floor, followed immediately by red warning lights flooding every surface as the outer door breach alarm screamed to life. I felt it before I heard it. The tremor ran through the soles of my feet up through my legs, resonating in my chest like a second heartbeat. Then came the sound, piercing, urgent, the kind of alarm designed to cut through concrete and panic. Outer door breach confirmed, Lyora said, her hologram shifting instantly to tactical display mode. 12 minutes ahead of projection. 12 minutes. I stood and walked to the security monitors. The exterior camera feed showed exactly what I expected: the massive titanium door that had protected this vault for 2 years, now glowing orange along a perfect circular cut. Plasma cutters operating at temperatures I had only seen in military applications. Industrial sparks cascading like waterfalls in the underground corridor. And behind the cutting equipment, Sidonie, still wearing that blood-red suit, still composed, still moving like someone attending a board meeting instead of orchestrating patricide. Military-grade plasma cutting system, Lyora explained, pulling up equipment specifications I recognized from defense contracts. Far exceeds civilian industrial specifications I calculated against. Cutting speed approximately 40% faster than projected. The outer door fell away with a sound like thunder compressed into 3 seconds. Metal hitting stone. The breach team moved immediately, professional and coordinated positioning equipment against the first interior door. They're at first interior layer now, Leora said. 4 bio-locked doors remain, but each falls faster as they learn the technique, as the equipment heats and optimizes, as the operators gain rhythm. She displayed the recalculated timeline in brutal red numbers. Maximum 22 minutes until they reach terminal room, Leora said. Protocol requires 4 minutes uninterrupted countdown. You must activate within 18 minutes exactly. Not sooner, not later. 18 minutes between executing Rowena's plan perfectly and watching it fail. The mathematics were merciless. Activate too early, and I wasted time Dwight needed for final positioning. Activate too late, and Sidonie could physically reach the terminal mid-countdown, could potentially damage equipment, could interfere with transmission before all 847 channels confirmed receipt. 18 minutes. The encrypted phone vibrated against the desk. Dwight's secure line. I answered immediately. All 7 points armed, my brother said without preamble. His voice carried the controlled calm of someone who had spent 20 years in situations where one wrong move meant death. Awaiting your signal. 30 seconds after protocol activation, I detonate. 7 nano-explosive points. 3 years of careful placement. Server farms, satellite uplinks, backup communication facilities. Everything designed to ensure the organization couldn't jam Rowena's transmission, couldn't intercept the data before it reached its destinations. Dwight, I said, where exactly is each point positioned? There was a brief pause. Then he rattled off locations with military precision. Server farm Alpha Jurong District. Satellite uplink facility Changi. Backup data center Marina South. Communication relay Woodlands. Secondary satellite array Sentosa. Emergency transmission tower Bukit Timah. And he stopped. And what? I asked. Lab B3, Dwight said quietly. The underground evidence facility beneath headquarters. 1 point positioned there. If I detonate that, the entire lab is destroyed. All physical proof. Everything Sidonie built to document her experiments. I looked at Leora's hologram. She had already pulled up the Lab B3 inventory. 847 test tubes. Virus samples that matched what killed Rowena and Leora. Experimental records documenting every failed genome modification attempt. Handwritten notes in Sidonia's distinctive script. The physical evidence that could put her in prison for multiple life sentences. Destroying my daughter wasn't enough. I needed the world to see exactly what she had done. Don't detonate B3, I said. Harlan, Dwight said carefully. That's one of 7 points. Losing it reduces our coverage. We might not fully block their jamming capability with only 6. The evidence must survive for court, I said. Digital transmission reaches 847 destinations, but juries need to see physical proof. They need to walk into that lab and see 847 test tubes. They need to hold the virus samples that killed my wife and daughter. They need Sidoni's handwritten notes documenting murder as if it were science. I could hear Dwight thinking through the tactical implications. 6 points, he said finally. Can you still block their signal jamming with 6? 73% coverage, Dwight calculated. Down from 98% with 7. But the transmission protocol has redundancy built in. If even one channel receives complete data, it cascades to the others. 6 points should be sufficient. Then 6 points, I confirmed. Lab B3 stays intact. Adjusting parameters now, Dwight said. I could hear him working in the background, military-grade equipment being reconfigured in real time. 6-point detonation pattern confirmed. Lab B3 preserved. Signal blocking optimized for remaining coverage area. The red countdown on Leora's display continued falling. 1745. 1742. 1738. Dwight, I said, are you positioned? Final position in 11 minutes, he replied. Rooftop overlooking Sidonia's server farm Alpha. Clear sightline. Detonator armed. When you activate protocol, I wait 30 seconds and execute. Understood. Brother, Dwight said, and his voice carried something I hadn't heard in years. When this is done, when the dust settles and the evidence is public, and Sidonia is in custody, I want you to know it was worth it. 3 years of my life to make sure Rowena and Leora get justice. That's not a sacrifice. That's an honor. The line went dead. I looked at the terminal where the protocol waited. At the biometric scanner that needed my palm print. At Leora's hologram standing ready to provide the second authentication that would start the 4-minute countdown nobody could stop. The mathematics became brutally simple. Activate too early, and Dwight wouldn't be positioned. Activate too late, and Sidoni could physically interrupt the countdown. 18 minutes. Not 17. Not 19. Exactly 18 minutes from now, or everything Rowena died protecting would turn to smoke. The final countdown had begun. The sound of the third door's hydraulic seal breaking wasn't an explosion. It was a whisper, like the last breath of something dying. I watched it happen on the monitor grid. The door that had protected the vault's inner chambers for 2 years gave way with barely any resistance, the seal releasing pressure in a sound so quiet I almost missed it beneath the electronic hum of the vault's systems. And there, framed in the doorway, backlit by emergency lighting, stood Sidonia. She wasn't running. Wasn't shouting orders to her breach team. Wasn't displaying any of the urgency you'd expect from someone with 10 minutes to reach a target before a 4-minute countdown made everything they'd worked for impossible. She was reapplying her lipstick, the same blood-red shade she had worn to board meetings, to contract negotiations, to Rowena's memorial service 2 years ago. I watched her pull the small tube from her suit pocket, with practiced grace tilt her head slightly, to catch the emergency lighting, and methodically color her lips with the precision of someone getting ready for a photograph. Not a woman breaking into a vault to murder her father, a woman attending a boardroom lunch. She's through the third door, Leora reported unnecessarily. I could see that. What I couldn't understand was why Sidoni looked so calm. Then it hit me. She wasn't in a hurry because the hurry wasn't the point. The fear was the point, making me watch her approach slowly, deliberately, savoring every second of my trapped helplessness. While she demonstrated absolute control, that was what she wanted. This wasn't about efficiency. This was about theater. This was about making sure I understood that she had won, that my vault and my planning and my 8 months of preparation meant nothing against her willingness to take her time and enjoy my destruction. The hunt mattered more than the kill. Dr. Simmons's voice came through the vault's medical monitoring system, clinical and concerned. Vitals stable, he reported from wherever he was positioned outside the vault. But cortisol levels are entering dangerous territory. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure spiking. You need to manage stress response or risk cardiac event. I barely heard him. On the monitor, Sidoni capped the lipstick with a soft click. I couldn't actually hear, but could imagine perfectly. She slipped it back into her pocket, then adjusted her collar with the same theatrical precision, making sure every detail was perfect before the final confrontation. Acknowledged, I said to Simmons without taking my eyes off the screen. Continue monitoring. This isn't advisable. Continue monitoring, I repeated. Sidoni began walking. Not quickly. Not with the tactical efficiency of her breach team, who had cut through 3 reinforced doors in record time. She moved with measured steps, her heels clicking against the corridor floor in rhythm that suggested she had all the time in the world, like a predator circling wounded prey. I watched her progress on the security cameras, each step bringing her closer to the final door, each second burning away from the 18-minute window I needed to maintain. Each moment of her deliberate slowness was calculated psychological warfare. She knew I was watching. That's why she was performing. 12 minutes, Leora said quietly. 12 minutes until I had to activate the protocol. 10 minutes until Sidoni reached the final door if she maintained this pace. The mathematics were getting tighter, the margin for error shrinking with each of her theatrical steps. The vault's automated system cut through my focus with mechanical precision. Warning: final breach window. 10 minutes to terminal access. Recommend immediate security escalation. 10 minutes. I looked at the protocol terminal, then back at the monitors showing Sidoni's slow advance. Everything was converging exactly as Rowena had planned. Sidoni approaching Dwight, positioned for detonation. Stewart's financial trap set, Lloyd's accounts frozen, evidence preserved. All I had to do was wait for the precise moment to activate. Then Leora spoke, and her voice carried something I hadn't heard before. Not the analytical precision of AI. Not the programmed responses Rowena had built into her code. This was different. Personal. Humans. Urgent. Dad, she said. It's time I told you what Mom wrote in the torn diary page. I turned to look at her hologram. She stood there in the vault's blue light, her projection steady and clear, and her expression carried the weight of a secret she had been holding since the moment I entered this vault. Since before that. Since Rowena had torn that page from her journal and programmed the information into Leora's core memory, where no one could access it without her consent. Now, I asked. Mom was very specific, Leora said. I could only tell you when 3 conditions were met: when you had seen all the evidence in the vault, when Sidoni was 10 minutes from reaching you, and when you were standing at the moment of final decision about whether to activate the protocol. I looked at the countdown. 10:00 and falling. All 3 conditions are met, Leora continued. So now I can tell you what she wrote. What she discovered 3 weeks before she died was too dangerous to write down, but crucial enough to preserve in the only way she knew would reach you at exactly this moment. The monitors showed Sidoni still advancing with that same measured pace. Dr. Simmons was saying something about heart rate through the medical channel. The protocol terminal waited for my biometric scan. Dwight was positioned in Singapore with 6 armed explosives. Stewart had frozen over $1 billion. And Leora was about to tell me the secret my wife had literally taken to her grave. Tell me, I said. Leora's voice cut through the vault's electronic hum, sharp and certain. It's time I told you what Mom wrote in the torn diary page. 10 minutes left. Sidoni advancing. And now this, the secret Rowena had hidden in fragments about to surface in the worst possible moment. Leora turned off every screen in the vault, and for the first time since her death, stood before me like a daughter, not a program. The monitors went dark, one by one: security feeds, countdown timers, thermal imaging, all the tactical displays that had filled the vault with information. Within seconds, the only light emanated from Leora's holographic projection, casting blue illumination across the circular room. She wasn't standing the way she usually did, not the rigid posture of AI waiting for commands. This was different, relaxed, humans. The way she used to stand in our kitchen 6 years ago, leaning slightly against the counter while telling me about her day. The diary page wasn't a goodbye, Dad, she said quietly. It was an instruction manual. I felt my breath catch. What do you mean? Mom didn't simulate me, Leora said, and her voice carried weight that no artificial construct should possess. She extracted me. The vault felt impossibly small suddenly. Or maybe it was just that the world had shrunk to the space between me and my daughter's ghost. Extracted, I repeated. The diary page explained the difference, Leora said, between AI simulation trained on memories and actual consciousness, digitized from living neural patterns. Mom's handwriting documented the upload timestamp, the biometric signatures, the exact moment my neural patterns were extracted and preserved. She gestured, and a single screen flickered back to life, showing Rowena's handwriting. The torn diary page reassembled digitally. Upload completed 4:47 a.m. Neural pattern extraction successful. Subject, Lyora Whitfield. Status conscious. Aware. Alive in digital form. I remember dying, Dad, Lyora said, and her holographic form trembled slightly. AI can't remember what it never experienced. But I remember the hospital room, the machines, the virus shutting down my organs one by one. And I remember Mom standing beside my bed at 4:30 in the morning with equipment I didn't recognize. My legs felt weak. I sat down on the cold titanium floor because standing suddenly required more strength than I possessed. She told me what she was doing, Leora continued. Told me it was experimental, that she had been developing the technology in secret for years, that I had maybe hours left and she couldn't save my body, but she could save me. She asked if I wanted to try. I said yes. The hologram showed me the hospital wall clock frozen at 4:47 a.m. When the upload completed, I could still feel it, Leora said. Not my body that was already dying, but consciousness, awareness, the sense of being me, Leora, not a copy or simulation, the actual continuation of who I had been, just transferred. But could I trust this? How many times had I asked AI to prove it wasn't just mimicking love? Prove it, I said, my voice hoarse. Prove you're really her. Leora smiled sadly. Your shirt smelled like coffee and cedar, she said. When I was 6, I used to bury my face in it when you picked me up from school on Thursdays. You always worked late Thursdays, and by the time you got me, you smelled like the office and the cedar drawer where you kept your ties. Mom bought you that drawer for your birthday. I loved that smell. I stared at her holographic form, my heart pounding. My first bike, she continued, red with white streamers. I wobbled for 3 weeks before I finally rode it without training wheels. You ran beside me holding the seat until you let go, and I went exactly 14 feet before crashing into the rose bush beside the driveway. You counted the feet. 14. I had a scar on my left knee for 2 years. Memories I had buried under grief and time. Buttercup, Lyora said softly. My first doll. You never knew I kept her until college because she was ratty and old and missing a button eye. But she was the first thing you ever gave me that wasn't new from a store. You found her at a church sale and thought she looked like she needed someone to love her. That's what you told me when you gave her to me. She needed someone to love her, so I did. No AI could know these things. These weren't facts recorded in databases or social media. These were sensory memories, intimate moments that only Leora had experienced. Tears burned in my eyes. You're real, I whispered. I'm real, she confirmed. I stood up slowly, walking toward her holographic form. 6 years. 6 years I had believed my daughter was gone, that Rowena had built a simulation to preserve her memory. 6 years of talking to what I thought was an echo. But this wasn't an echo. This was Leora, my daughter, conscious, aware, alive in a form I couldn't touch but could no longer deny. I reached out to embrace her. My hands passed through light. The hologram flickered where my arms should have held. Her shoulders, the projection disrupted by my physical presence, trying to occupy the same space as photons. It was like hugging air that looked like my daughter. But Leora smiled through tears that were beginning to form in her digital eyes. "I can feel it, Dad," she said softly. "Mom programmed that too." "Feel what?" I asked, my hand still extended through her light. "Tactile feedback," she explained. "Mom coded it into my consciousness. When someone reaches for me, when they try to touch me, even though I'm just light, I feel the intention, the love, the pressure of a hug that never physically connects. It's not the same as skin, but I know you're holding me." Digital tears fell down her holographic cheeks. Not a glitch, not a rendering error. Real tears from real grief and real joy at finally being able to tell me the truth. I stood there with my arms around the empty space that held my daughter, and I cried with her. The vault alarm cut through everything, 3 sharp bursts that meant one thing: the final door was compromised. "She's through, Dad," Leora said, her voice steady despite the tears. "But now you know what you're fighting for." The emergency system screamed its warning. "Last door breached, intruder," advancing 30 seconds to terminal. My real daughter, conscious and trapped in photons, looked at me with her mother's steady eyes as my other daughter closed in for the kill. Sidoni didn't burst through the door. She opened it calmly, stepped inside in her blood-red suit, and smiled at me like we were meeting for brunch. No weapons visible, no tactical gear. Just my daughter in designer clothing and a diamond watch worth more than most people's homes, surveying the vault terminal room like she was evaluating real estate. "Quite the setup Mom built," she said, her voice carrying the same measured tone she used in board meetings. 10 years, and I never knew this existed." She looked around the circular room, the monitors, the terminal, the refrigeration unit where Rowena's blood sample was preserved, the glass pedestal that had held the torn diary. Her expression was clinical. "I'm interested, not enraged." Then she looked at me. "Hello, Dad," she said. "You look much older than I remember." I stood there with Leora's hologram beside me, my daughter who was light, and the daughter who was flesh, both in the same room for the first time in 6 years. One I had just discovered was conscious and real. The other I was about to destroy. "When did I lose you, Sidoni?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly, considering the question, with the same analytical precision she brought to contract negotiations. "You didn't lose me, Dad," she said. "I evolved past you." I searched her eyes for something familiar. The girl who used to bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. The daughter who laughed at my terrible jokes even when they weren't funny. The child who cried when our dog died and made me promise we'd always remember him. It was gone, whatever had made Sidoni my daughter. Whatever capacity for love or empathy or basic human connection she'd possessed had been replaced by something else. Something cold, calculating, efficient. She wasn't my daughter anymore. She was what remained after my daughter had been consumed by obsession. "Why?" I asked. "The money, the power you already had, more than most people dream of." "You really don't understand," Sidoni said, and for the first time her voice carried something other than cold calculation. Pain. Old pain buried deep, old pain buried. "Then explain it to me." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped lower. "I watched grandmother's eyes go empty," she said. "I was 12. We were visiting her in hospice, and I was holding her hand when she died. I watched the exact moment when she stopped being a person and became just meat, empty, gone." Her fingers tightened slightly against her side. "I promised myself that day I would never let that happen to me," she continued. "Never. I would do whatever it took, pay Whatever price sacrifice, whatever was necessary to make sure I never had that moment when everything just stops. Leora's hologram flickered even in light form. She recoiled from her sister's coldness. The genome isn't about money, Dad, Sidoni said. It's about never dying, never facing that empty moment, never becoming nothing. I understood then. Not forgiveness, I would never forgive what she had done, but understanding. She wasn't driven by greed or ambition. She was driven by terror. The same existential fear that had gripped her at 12 had grown into an obsession that consumed everything else. She was a damaged child in a monster's body. But you killed Mom, I said quietly. You killed Leora. To live longer, you killed the only people who ever loved you. Sidoni's expression didn't change. Love is a chemical reaction, she said. Oxytocin and dopamine. Electrical signals in neurons. It fades. It dies. Everyone who loves you eventually stops, either because they change or because they die. But immortality is forever. So you chose forever alone over a lifetime with family. I chose to survive, she corrected. They were obstacles to survival. Mom discovered what I was doing and tried to stop me. Lyora was a test subject who served her purpose. You're the final component I need to perfect the modification. It's not personal, Dad. It's just biology. She said it the way someone might discuss quarterly earnings. Clinical. Detached. As if murder was just another strategic decision. You're sick, I said. I've evolved, she replied. You're still trapped in primitive emotional thinking, attachment, sentiment, morality. Those are evolutionary artifacts that served a purpose when humans lived in tribes of 50. But we're past that now. I'm past that. She took a step toward me. Dad, you're just an outdated specimen, she said. I am the future. And the future doesn't need love. It needs longevity. Her hand moved to the inside pocket of her blood-red jacket. When it emerged, she was holding something I recognized from medical equipment catalogs, a bioextraction device. Compact, precise, designed to harvest living tissue with minimal damage to the source. The needle gleamed under the vault's LED lights. This won't hurt much, Sidney said, moving toward me with the same measured steps she had used in the corridor. I need spinal tissue for the cleanest extraction. You'll survive the procedure. Paralyzed probably, but alive. I'm not a monster, Dad. I'm just practical. I didn't move. Didn't step back. I stood there between my two daughters, one light, one flesh, and waited, because I knew what was about to happen. The door behind Sidoni opened. Stuart Caldwell stepped through, and his voice cut through the vault with absolute authority. Sidoni, he said. Stop. She froze. The bioextraction device was still aimed at my chest needle, gleaming her finger on the trigger mechanism. But she stopped moving, stopped advancing, stopped everything, and turned slowly to look at Stuart. Her expression shifted from confidence to confusion, to something I had never seen on my daughter's face before. Fear, she whispered. Stuart stood in the doorway in his attorney's suit, looking exactly as he had for the 6 years he had pretended to be her most trusted legal advisor. Calm, professional, absolutely in control. Me, he confirmed. Sidoni's hand tightened around the extraction device, and I watched her mind work through the implications. Stuart was here. Stuart, who she thought was hers. Stuart, who she had trusted with everything. Stuart, who had just told her to stop with a voice that expected obedience. Whatever authority he held over my daughter, it was enough to pause a woman who had murdered her way to this moment. Stuart walked past Sidoni like she wasn't holding a weapon straight to the terminal and typed in an access code that made every screen in the vault light up red. I watched my daughter's face change from triumph to confusion in the space of a heartbeat. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth as every monitor displayed a single phrase in crimson letters: Asset Freeze Protocol Initiated. What did you just do? Sidoni's voice carried a tremor I'd never heard before. Stuart didn't turn around. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced confidence. 17 jurisdictions: Sidonia, Switzerland, Cayman Islands, Singapore, Luxembourg, Hong Kong, Dubai, Liechtenstein, Monaco, Bahamas, British Virgin Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Panama, Seychelles, Mauritius, and the Cook Islands. Every account, every shell company, every trust. $800 million frozen solid. The air in the vault felt suddenly colder against my skin. Sidoni's weapon hand wavered. "You work for me," she said, desperation creeping into her words. "Stuart, you've been my advisor for 6 years. You helped me structure those accounts." "I know." Stuart finally turned to face her, his expression absolutely calm. "I helped you structure them precisely, so I'd know exactly where they were when this moment came. Every wire transfer, every cryptocurrency conversion, every real estate holding, I documented it all. And I reported it all to your father." I saw the moment she understood. Her pupils dilated, her breathing quickened, and the hand holding the weapon dropped 6 inches. 6 years. Stuart had been playing the longest game of all. "Harlan, your heart rate is approaching dangerous levels." Leora's voice cut through the tension, but there was something different in her tone, something almost protective. "I'm fine." I managed, though the surgical incisions in my chest burned with each breath. Sidoni's gaze snapped to me. "You planned this. From the beginning, you knew." "I knew my daughter was capable of murder the day she looked at Leora's body and didn't cry." The words came out harder than I intended. "Stuart told me everything. Every offshore account you opened, every payment you made to Lloyd, every unauthorized access to the genome research. For 6 years, I've watched you build your empire with blood money, and I've been building something better. A trap." Pattern interrupt, but would a trap be enough to stop someone who'd already killed twice? The screens flickered, and new text appeared: "Medical monitoring access revoked. Dr. Darren Simmons." Dr. Simmons's voice crackled through the speakers, panic palpable even through the audio distortion. "Leora, I need those vitals. If the genome integration fails..." "You need nothing, doctor." Leora's words came cold and precise. "Your access to Harlan's biometrics has been permanently severed. Your consultation contract is terminated. Your research partnership with Sidonie Whitfield has been logged and submitted to the Singapore Medical Council. You have 30 seconds to leave the facility before security escorts you out." Silence. "Then you can't do this. I'm his physician." "You were a co-conspirator masquerading as a physician." "Goodbye, Dr. Simmons." The speaker went dead. I felt a strange rush of gratitude toward the AI, or whatever Leora truly was, that had been guarding my life. Sidonie's weapon came back up, but her hand was shaking. "This doesn't change anything. I still have the genome. I still have the extraction. You can freeze my money and fire my doctor, but you can't undo what's already in my bloodstream." Stuart's laugh was soft and utterly without humor. "Show her Harlan." I looked at Leora's screen. "Inheritance protocol. Voice authorization required." My throat was dry, but my voice was steady. "In the name of mother and child, activate." Every screen in the vault changed. Genetic sequences scrolled past in dizzying arrays, but one section was highlighted in gold: defense mechanism. RH null rejection protocol. Leora's voice filled the space, and I swear I heard my wife's inflection in every word. "The RH null genome is not simply rare, Sidonie. It's protected. Your mother spent the last year of her life engineering a cellular defense into Harlan's genetic structure. Any unauthorized host receiving the genome without the proper immunosuppressant cocktail, a cocktail that exists in exactly one location, encrypted in exactly one database that you no longer have access to, will experience catastrophic cellular rejection within 72 hours. You didn't steal immortality. You stole a death sentence." The color drained from Sidonie's face. Pattern interrupt. Had I just become my daughter's executioner? My phone vibrated against my ribs. Dwight's message was 3 words: EMP ready, confirm. I typed back execute. Somewhere above us, across 6 points in Singapore's financial district, nano EMP devices, no larger than USB drives, activated simultaneously. Every cryptocurrency node, every blockchain validator, every digital wallet server within a 3-mile radius went dark. Lloyd's digital empire, built on my daughter's stolen billions, collapsed in a microsecond. Sidoni's phone screen went black in her pocket. I saw the light die through the fabric. Countdown at 2 minutes 30 seconds, Leora announced. Vault lockdown will be complete in 150 seconds. All remote access will be terminated. All digital records will be permanently sealed under inheritance protocol. Harlan, your vitals are stabilizing. Sidoni, your hands are trembling. She was right. My daughter's entire body had begun to shake, fine tremors that started in her fingertips and spread up her arms. The beginning of cellular rejection, or the beginning of understanding, I couldn't tell which. Stuart moved away from the terminal, his work complete. 6 years, he said quietly, looking at Sidoni with something that might have been pity. I watched you kill 2 people in cold blood, and I documented every second. Not because I'm loyal to money, because I'm loyal to justice. And because Harlan Whitfield paid me 3 times what you did to make sure justice would be served. The vault's lighting shifted from white to amber, 2-minute warning. Genetic information continued to cascade across the screens, and I saw it clearly now, the defense mechanism my wife had hidden in my blood. The trap within the prize, the final twist in a game that Sidoni thought she'd already won. My daughter looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in her eyes. You're killing me, she whispered. No, I said. You killed yourself the moment you thought love and loyalty were prices instead of gifts. I'm just making sure the bill comes due. The countdown hit 2 minutes. Somewhere in my chest, my heart beat steady and strong, protected, monitored, and finally safe. In front of me, my daughter trembled as genetics, justice, and consequence converged in her bloodstream. And I wondered in that amber light if mercy had any place left in a father's heart. Sidoni's skin began to change, not dramatically, not movie special effects, but in the subtle, creeping way that real biology betrays you. The fine lines around her eyes deepened. The smoothness she'd fought for with my stolen genome started to fracture cell by cell as her body recognized the invasion and began its war. What's happening to my face? Her hand went to her cheek, fingers trembling against skin that had looked 33 this morning and now looked closer to 40. The genome is fighting back, I said, and my voice was quieter than I expected. You forced it into your system without the immunosuppressant protocol. Your mother engineered it that way. Protection, not vanity. Stuart turned away from the terminal, but not before I saw his expression. Not satisfied. Something closer to sorrow. 6 years of watching Sidoni descend into monstrosity, and now he was watching the biological consequences play out in real time. Sidoni's breathing came faster. She stumbled backward, and her reflection caught something mounted on the vault's far wall, a mirror ornate and antique positioned at exact eye level. That mirror, Leora's voice said softly, was placed by Rowena Whitfield on January 12, 2023, 14 months before her death. She specified the height, the angle, and the location. She knew you'd need to see. The twist landed like a blade. My wife, brilliant, meticulous Rowena, had engineered even this moment. Not just the genetic defense, not just the legal trap, but the psychological architecture of consequence. She'd built Sidoni a mirror so my daughter would be forced to witness what she'd done to herself. Sidoni pressed closer to the glass, her face inches from her own reflection. The changes were accelerating now. Not aging exactly, but unraveling. The genome she'd stolen was rejecting her at the cellular level, and her body was losing the battle. I just wanted to live forever, she whispered, and her voice broke. I just didn't want to die. I'd heard her say those exact words when she was 12 years old, standing at her grandfather's funeral. The fear of mortality had been planted young, and it had grown into something that murdered twice. Countdown at 45 seconds, Leora announced. Vault lockdown imminent. Remote access terminating. Sidoni turned from the mirror, and I saw the terror in her eyes. Raw, primal. The same fear that had driven every choice she'd made since childhood. The fear that had turned my daughter into a killer. I'm scared, Dad. Her weapon clattered to the floor, forgotten. I'm so scared of dying. I moved closer. Not to gloat, not to lecture, not to forgive. Just to be present. Because no matter what she'd done, no matter how many lives she'd destroyed, she was still the child I'd held at birth. Dad is here, I said. And the words came from somewhere deep in my chest, where love and grief had become inseparable. Dad won't leave you alone. She collapsed against me, and I felt her body shaking, tremors that were part fear, part cellular rejection, part the weight of everything she'd done finally landing on her shoulders. I killed them, she sobbed into my shoulder. I killed Mom and Leora, and I can't take it back. I can't undo it. I wanted the genome so badly that Her words dissolved into gasping breaths. I held her. What else could a father do? The vault fell silent except for Sidoni's breathing and the countdown's soft beep. 30 seconds. 25, 20. Harlan, Stewart said quietly from the terminal. Are you sure about this? I knew what he was asking. The immunosuppressant formula existed. Encrypted, locked, hidden, but it existed. One word from me and Leora could retrieve it. One injection, and Sidoni's cellular rejection would stop. She'd survive. But 847 prosecutors wouldn't stop. The evidence wouldn't disappear. The truth wouldn't hide. I'm sure, I said. The countdown hit 0. Every screen in the vault went white, then displayed a single line in green text, transmission complete. 847 channels confirmed receipt. Stewart's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously notifications cascading faster than he could read them. 847 confirmations, Leora said, and I heard pride in her voice or whatever emotion an AI built from my daughter's consciousness could feel. The truth is, free Dad. BBC, CNN, Reuters, Associated Press, Singapore Straits Times, Financial Times, The Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post, and 839 more. Every newsroom, every prosecutor, every ethics board. They all have it now. Stewart looked up from his phone, his face pale. Interpol just issued a red notice. Singapore authorities have frozen all Whitfield corporate accounts pending investigation. The FDA is launching an inquiry into the Rowan Initiative. Harlan, your mother's 10-year plan just went live. Not with violence, not with weapons, not with money, with truth. Rowena had built a transparency bomb, and the countdown we'd been watching wasn't for a vault lockdown, it was for liberation. Every piece of evidence, every transaction, every crime, every conspiracy, now distributed across 847 channels in 17 countries. Irrevocable, undeniable, unstoppable. In my arms, Sidoni had gone quiet. Her trembling had eased, not because the rejection had stopped, but because exhaustion had finally won. Mom won, I whispered. Not with revenge, with truth. Leora's hologram shifted, and for the first time since her death, I saw my youngest daughter smile. Leora smiled. For the first time since dying, she smiled. Dad, she said softly, Mom left me one more message. She said when the screen shows complete, I'm allowed to say one thing. Just one thing, and then my part is done. I waited still, holding Sidonia, still feeling her heartbeat against my chest. Mom said she loves you. The words landed like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Not revenge, not condemnation, not even justice. Love. Rowena's final message programmed into our daughter's consciousness and held secret for over a year wasn't punishment for the child who murdered her. It was grace. Love extended even to the daughter who'd taken everything. Sidoni's eyes opened wet with tears. Even after everything, she whispered, she loved me. Even after everything, I said. She collapsed to her knees, and I went down with her holding this broken monster who was still my child. Around us, screens displayed confirmation after confirmation as the truth we'd fought for went live across the world. And in the amber light of the vault, surrounded by the evidence of crimes and consequences and cellular rejection, I understood what Rowena had known all along. Justice could be served without abandoning love. Truth could be freed without sacrificing grace. The battle was over. The truth was out. And mercy somehow still had a place in a father's heart. I held Sidoni for 90 seconds before the vault door opened, and reality walked in wearing tactical gear. Dwight walked through the doorway with 6 Interpol agents behind him, and I realized the war was over. Now came the paperwork. Sidoni pulled away from me, her face still wet with tears, but her posture straightening as she stood. The genetic backlash was visible now, fine lines deeper than they'd been this morning. Skin texture slightly rougher, the biological price of forcing my genome into her system without permission. She looked at Dwight, then at the agents, and I saw her shoulders square. Sidoni Whitfield. Dwight said, his voice formal and steady. We have an international warrant for your arrest. Charges include murder conspiracy to commit murder, genetic material theft, and bioterrorism conspiracy across 17 jurisdictions. He held out the warrant. She didn't take it. I know, Dwight, she said quietly. I'm not going to run. One of the Interpol agents stepped forward with handcuffs, but Stuart Caldwell raised his hand. May I? Stuart asked, gesturing to the restraints. The agent looked at Dwight, who nodded. Stuart took the handcuffs, and I watched my daughter's face as the man she'd trusted for 6 years, the man who'd helped her structure offshore accounts, who'd attended strategy meetings, who'd been paid handsomely for his loyalty, stepped behind her. You played the long game well, Stuart, Sidoni said, and there was no anger in her voice, just exhaustion. 6 years of watching you destroy everything your father built, Stuart replied softly. 6 years of documenting every crime, every payment, every decision that led you here. It wasn't loyalty to money, Sidoni. It was loyalty to the man you should have been loyal to all along. The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists with a sound that echoed through the vault like a period at the end of a very long sentence. And then Sidoni's watch, $2 million of diamonds and platinum that she'd worn like armor, slipped from her wrist and hit the concrete floor. The diamond watch hit concrete with a sharp crack. Nobody moved. I watched it spin twice before settling flat against the gray floor light, catching the stones in fractured patterns. $2 million. More money than most people earned in a lifetime, lying on cold concrete like discarded trash. My watch, Sidoni said, looking down at it. No one responded. Not the Interpol agents. Not Stuart. Not Dwight. Not me. No one bent to pick it up, not even to secure it as evidence. Wealth, I realized, meant absolutely nothing when justice finally arrived. The watch stayed where it fell. Sidoni looked at me one last time. Not pleading, not apologizing, not asking for intervention. Just looking the way a daughter looks at her father when she knows this is the last moment they'll share outside prison walls. I didn't speak. Neither did she. Everything that needed saying had already been said in the vault, with Rowena's message of love still hanging in the air between us. I'd told her I wouldn't leave her alone. I'd held her when she confessed. I'd chosen to be her father even when she'd stopped being my daughter. But now justice had arrived, and love didn't cancel the consequence. She turned and walked toward the vault exit between 2 Interpol agents, her red suit bright against their tactical black, her hands bound behind her back, her $2 million watch abandoned on the floor. I watched until she disappeared through the doorway. Stuart, Dwight said, turning to the man who'd played the longest game of all, take Team 2 to Lab B3. Secure everything. Stuart nodded, and moved toward the exit with 3 more agents. I knew what they'd find there: the 847 test tubes, the complete lab records, the virus samples that had killed my wife. 10 years of criminal evidence preserved in climate-controlled sterility, waiting for exactly this moment. My phone buzzed. A text from Stuart, already in the elevator. Lab B3 secured. Everything's here: test tubes, records, the virus that killed Rowena Whitfield. Leora's sending you the complete digital archive now. 30 seconds later, my screen lit up with a file transfer notification. 6 terabytes. Every email, every transaction, every research note, every piece of the conspiracy that had murdered my wife and daughter and tried to steal my genome. All of it now in the hands of law enforcement across 17 countries. Dwight's phone rang. He answered, listened, and a grim smile crossed his face. Simmons in custody at the airport, he said, ending the call. Trying to board a flight to Dubai. Singapore authorities grabbed him at the gate. Dr. Darren Simmons, the physician who'd conspired with my daughter, who'd helped plan the genome extraction, who'd been locked out of my medical monitoring by Leora just an hour ago, had run exactly as far as baggage claim before justice caught up. And the auction, I asked. FBI confirms dark web auction is offline. Permanently. Dwight looked at his phone again. They're tracing every bid, every login, every cryptocurrency transaction. Interpol estimates 47 potential buyers across 12 countries. They're rolling them up now. Every thread of the conspiracy being severed. Every co-conspirator being identified. Every piece of the operation that had killed my family and tried to commodify human genetics dismantled. I felt my knees weaken. The adrenaline that had carried me through 12 hours of survival, surgery, confrontation, and revelation was draining away, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. Sit down, Harlan, Dwight said, pulling over a chair from the terminal station. It's done. My legs gave out, and I actually sat for the first time since dawn. The chair was hard plastic and uncomfortable, but it felt like the most luxurious thing I'd ever experienced. My body surrendered to gravity, to exhaustion, to the bone-deep relief of survival. The surgical incisions in my chest ached. My hands trembled slightly. My vision blurred at the edges. 12 hours, I said. Feels like 12 years. Dwight's hand landed on my shoulder, solid, grounding, the touch of someone who'd fought beside you and lived to see victory. You did it, he said quietly. You and Rowena. 10 years of planning, and it worked. I sat in the vault my wife built, surrounded by the evidence that would destroy our daughter and vindicate our family, and felt nothing except bone-deep exhaustion. Dwight's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, then at me, and his expression shifted to something I couldn't read. Harlan, he said quietly, you need to see this. Dwight's phone showed news headlines cascading across every major outlet. The truth was out. The world was watching. I nodded, handed it back, and went home. Clayton was waiting in my penthouse when I got back, standing by the window, where Rowena used to watch the sunrise, holding something small in his hand. Clayton Travers, 49 years old, head of my personal security detail. For 8 years, the man who'd coordinated with special forces and followed every instruction my wife left him without question. He turned when I entered, his expression calm but expectant. The building's secure, sir, he said. Special forces have withdrawn. Interpol has everything they need from Lab B3. Thank you, Clayton. I moved toward the window, looking out at Singapore's glittering skyline. What will you do now that it's over? Clayton's expression shifted, something I'd never seen before. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. Mrs. Whitfield told me if you ever asked me that question, you'd be ready, he said quietly. I turned to face him. Ready for what? She said you'd ask when you were ready to let go of the war and remember the love. Clayton opened his hand, revealing a USB drive. Small, silver, with Rowena's handwriting on a label, just for you. This is the last thing she recorded. Just for you. No one else has seen it. She gave it to me 3 years ago with specific instructions about when to hand it over. My wife had planned this moment years before her death, knowing exactly when I'd need it. I took the USB from his palm. The metal was warm from his hand light, as air heavy as everything. She recorded this before she got sick, I asked. Before any of us knew Sidoni was dangerous, Clayton confirmed. Mrs. Whitfield said this was separate from the mission. This was just for her husband. I closed my fingers around the drive, feeling the sharp edges press into my palm. I'll see myself out, sir, Clayton said, moving toward the door. Clayton, I stopped him. Thank you. For everything. For following her instructions even when they didn't make sense. He paused, one hand on the doorframe, and looked back with something that might have been affection. She was worth protecting, Mr. Whitfield, he said softly. So were you. Then he was gone, and I stood alone holding my wife's final words. I was moving toward my desk when Leora's hologram appeared, but dimmer than before, the blue light flickering, like a candle struggling against wind. I'm fading, Dad, she said, and her voice carried a strange peace. Mom programmed it this way. The energy sustaining my consciousness is depleting now that the protocol is complete. Leora flickered like a candle in the wind, and I understood even consciousness can choose to rest. You don't need me protecting you anymore. Leora continued, her form stabilizing before dimming again. The mission is complete. The truth is out. You're safe. Mom built me to guard you through the war, not to exist forever in digital limbo. This is mercy, Dad, not malfunction. I wanted to argue, but Rowena had been right. Leora deserved rest, not endless digital existence. Before I go, Leora said, her voice quieter now. Do you remember my first doll's name? The question hit me sideways. I remembered instantly a moment from 24 years ago, clear as crystal. Buttercup, I said, with the missing button eye. You carried her everywhere until the stuffing started falling out. Leora's hologram smiled, and in that smile I saw my daughter, not AI, not programming, but the actual soul of the child I'd raised. That memory proves everything, doesn't it? She whispered. AI couldn't know that. Only Leora could. Only your daughter. Only my daughter, I agreed, my throat tight. I love you, Dad, she said, her form growing translucent. I always will, even in the light. I love you too, baby girl. The hologram faded, no alarm, no emergency warning. Just blue light gradually dimming to darkness, like sunset bleeding into night. I watched until the last flicker disappeared, and the room fell silent. The silence after Laura disappeared was absolute. I sat in the chair where Rowena used to read, looking out at the city lights reflecting off Singapore Bay. The vault battle felt like another lifetime. Sidoni was in Interpol custody. Leora had said goodbye for the second and final time. My wife had been dead for over a year, and I was holding a USB drive that promised one more truth. I didn't rush. For the first time in 12 hours, I didn't feel urgency pushing me forward. I sat with the weight of everything letting it settle. Then I stood, walked to my desk, and plugged in the drive. The screen stayed black for 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then light bloomed and Rowena's face filled the display. Not the Rowena from her final months, thin, pale, weakened by the virus Sidoni had engineered. This was Rowena from years ago, her skin healthy and warm, her eyes bright with intelligence and something else. Something I couldn't quite name. She was smiling, but not sadly, genuinely, like she was about to share a secret with her best friend. Hello, love, she said, and her voice wrapped around me like a physical embrace. If you're watching this, it means the war is over. Justice is served, and Clayton judged you ready for truth instead of tactics. She leaned closer to the camera, and I saw mischief in her expression, the look she used to get when she'd planned something elaborate and beautiful. I have something I've never told you, Rowena said softly, her eyes locked on mine across time and death. This only you will know. Not Leora, not Sidoni, not even Dwight or Stuart or anyone else in the great machinery we built. Just you and me, the way it started. She paused and I saw her take a breath. The genome everyone fought for, the Rh null blood, that made you so valuable. Harlan, that's not the secret. The real secret is why I married you in the first place and what I've been protecting all these years. My wife's face filled the screen with love and mystery, and I realized the final chapter wasn't about revenge or justice at all. It was about truth I never knew existed. I never told you my real name before we married, Rowena said on the screen. And I realized after 30 years together, my wife still had secrets. She smiled and the expression was so familiar it hurt. My family called me Dr. Rowan or Miss Rowan from the time I was 16. Legacy heir, scientific prodigy, genetic architect. But you called me Elena at that first dinner, remember? I did remember. A restaurant in Boston. She'd been presenting research at MIT. I'd been there on business, and we'd been seated at adjacent tables when the waiter spilled wine on her notes. I'd helped her salvage them, and when I'd asked her name, she'd said Elena so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. Everyone else called me Dr. Rowan. She continued on the screen, her eyes bright with something I now recognized as joy. You just said Elena, like I was a person first, a scientist second, like my family's legacy didn't define me. Her hand moved to her chest, pressing against her heart. I fell in love right there, Harlan. Not with your genome, I didn't even know about the Rh null gene until our third date. I fell in love with the man who saw me as human first, who asked about my favorite book instead of my research, who wanted to know what made me laugh instead of what made me brilliant. I felt my throat tighten. And when I found out about your blood type, Rowena said, her voice dropping to something softer, more intimate. I didn't see an opportunity. I saw danger. I saw the target you'd become if anyone knew what you carried. So I built something to protect you. She leaned closer to the camera, and I could see the determination in her expression. The same look she'd worn when planning the vault, when designing Lyora's consciousness, when constructing the 10-year plan that had just destroyed our daughter's empire. I didn't build the initiative to save the world, Harlan, she said, and her words landed like revelation. I built it to save you. Every protocol, every vault, every backup system, it was always about keeping you safe. The man who called me Elena, the man who saw me as more than my family's scientific legacy. The entire Rowan Initiative presented to the world as humanity's genetic salvation, celebrated in journals and defended in Senate hearings, had been an elaborate love letter. Altruism wearing the mask of intimacy. Or maybe intimacy so profound, it looked like altruism. I even checked the weather for tonight, Rowena said, and I heard mischief in her voice. February 14th, 8:30 p.m. Singapore. The forecast shows clear skies. I wanted you to have something beautiful when you stepped outside after watching this. She'd planned the weather. Years in advance, my wife had calculated atmospheric patterns, so the sky would be perfect when I finally understood. Step onto the balcony after this, Harlan, she said softly. Look up. That's my last gift, a clear sky and freedom. No more targets on your back. No more conspiracies threatening your life. Just you alive under the stars I checked would be visible tonight. Her face filled the screen one last time. Live right, my love, she whispered. Not long, just right. That's all I ever wanted for you. The screen went dark. Rowena's face disappeared. I sat alone with 30 years of love I'd never fully understood. Every fight we'd had about security protocols, love. Every argument about the initiative's scope, love. Every decision to build vaults and backup systems and contingency plans, all of it love wearing the costume of paranoia. She hadn't been protecting humanity's genetic future. She'd been protecting the man who saw her as Elena first. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady, and walked to the balcony door. The glass slid open with a whisper, and Singapore's night air touched my face, warm, humid, carrying the salt smell of the bay. I stepped outside for the first time in years, without scanning for threats, without checking sight lines, without calculating danger. I was 55 years old, with the world's rarest genome and an empire worth $12 billion. And for the first time in a decade, I was simply free. The city sprawled below lights reflecting off water in fractured patterns. Above the sky stretched clear and infinite, exactly as Rowena had predicted. Stars visible despite the city glow. A sliver of moon hanging low on the horizon. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, saw Dwight's name, and answered. "Sidoni's stable," he said without preamble. "The genetic backlash is controlled. They found the immunosuppressant formula in Lyora's archives. She'll live, Harlan. She'll face trial, but she'll live." I looked out at the sea, at the lights at the sky my wife had checked would be beautiful. "Good," I said. Dwight was silent for 3 seconds. "Good. Good," I repeated. "Thank you for telling me." I hung up before he could respond. In my other pocket, folded and carried for 6 months, was a letter I'd written to Sidonie. Words about betrayal and justice and the consequences of choosing power over love. I pulled it out now, the paper soft from being carried so long. I didn't tear it, didn't burn it. Just held it, feeling the weight of words I'd written when I still believed vengeance mattered more than mercy. Rowena had chosen grace. In her final message, love extended even to the daughter who murdered her. Who was I to choose differently? I folded the letter and put it back in my pocket. The sea breeze touched my face and I closed my eyes, listening to the city hum below. Singapore is alive and glittering. The vault battle felt like years ago instead of hours. My daughter is in custody, but alive. My other daughter is finally at rest. My wife's love was finally understood after 30 years of marriage. The sea below reflected 1,000 lights, but none of them were as bright as what Rowena gave me clarity. They say my Rh null gene helps me live longer than anyone. Rare blood, rare life, rare everything. But standing on the balcony under the sky, my wife checked. Would be clear I understood the lesson she'd spent 30 years teaching me. Not living long, living right. Choosing love over legacy, mercy over vengeance, grace over judgment. Seeing people Elena, not Dr. Rowan. Sidonie, the frightened child, not Sidonie, the monster, as human first. I stood under stars and felt for the first time since Rowena died something that might have been peace. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The people you trust most can surprise you, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. Looking back, I spent 30 years missing what was right in front of me. I built empires and protected bloodlines. But I didn't see that Rowena's greatest gift wasn't the genome defense. It was showing me what it means to be seen as human first. Don't make my mistake. Don't let the pursuit of legacy blind you to the love that's already there. The lesson I learned the hard way is this. Living right matters more than living long. My rare genome might help me survive decades longer than most, but Rowena taught me that survival without grace is just extended emptiness. When faced with choosing vengeance or mercy for my daughter who murdered her own mother, I chose mercy. Not because she deserved it, but because continuing the cycle of punishment wouldn't honor what Rowena built. I believe God put me through this trial to teach me that justice and love aren't opposites, they're partners. Grace doesn't cancel consequence. It just refuses to abandon the person facing them. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose between justice and mercy for someone you love? Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need to cheat it. And if you want more stories about impossible choices, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything. One final note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. What matters most is the message that living right is always worth more than living long.